which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to call to order the September 12, 2018 Select Board meeting. Acceptance of the agenda, we have one change tonight. Under the Select Board reports and comments, number 2, the authorization for improvements for roadways for the Richmond project. We're going to move that to right before public hearing, so right after the citizen department request. We usually do that when people are here visiting and trying to catch a boat or a plane. So we're going to move that up a little bit. Everything else is the same. Announcements, Libby?
Thank you. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. The sewer project that began about a year ago or more, Nantucket Harbor Shimo Plus Area Sewer Extension Project, resumes next Monday, September 17th. Information can be found on the town website, and we will be providing regular updates as to where the work is occurring. You have a special town meeting beginning on Wednesday, October 10th at 6 p.m. at the high school. Voter registration deadline for that special town meeting is September 28th at 8 p.m. And we're going to get an update from DPW Director as to the schedule and status of some current roadway and sidewalk projects. And are you going to mention the Fill a Truck event too?
Yes. Thank you. Rob McNeil, DPW. The list of roadway projects we're pursuing over this fall and into the spring will be Cliff Road from Nantucket Road to Crooked Lane, Hummock Pond from Milk Street to Bartlett Farm Road, Maury Lane, a small section of Maury Lane out in Wisconsin, and Jefferson from Pleasant to Pine. These are intended to be a 2-inch mill and overlay. And folks should know that there's an exhaustive list of projects that are in the queue. Most are being delayed for other utility projects that are coming. So there's a lot that needs to get done, and we're pursuing those. But we want to make sure the pavement's the last thing to go down before these utility projects or after the utility projects occur. Sidewalks have commenced again down at Straight Wharf, and we'll migrate from there to Easy Street and then Lower Broad. And at the same time, we'll be working up on Main Street, project from Winter Street to Pleasant Street. I should note that the Main Street project, as well as the concept for Lover's Lane, Okawa, and Monahans is currently we're holding public information sessions on both of those, seeking input from the neighbors and the public. Moving on to the Fill a Truck, several departments are once again collaborating to collect donations at the Mid-Island Stop and Shop this coming Saturday from 1 to 3. Invite everyone to come along and bring your food donations or shop for us. That'd be great. Fill a truck, and it's for the benefit of the Nantucket Food Pantry. Thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment here tonight that is regarding something that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, move on to new business, none that I know of. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, payroll warrants, and treasury warrants for the dates stated on the agenda?
So moved.
Do a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Pending contracts. Any questions or anything you want to go over, Libby?
I just want to point out that the vast majority of the contracts relate to items that were approved by the 2018 annual town meeting, a couple of grant awards, and a few other issues, but I don't think there's anything overly controversial.
And all these items are being purchased for within the budget that was allocated for them.
All of the items that were approved at the annual town meeting or meetings, yes, there are a couple of items that we have secured funds for, but that were within the overall budget. For example, the Novak Consulting Group, which we discussed with the board a few weeks ago for continued development of the strategic plan. that may be the only one.
Oh,
I know DPW, I think fire and sewer, those were heavily vetted in Capcom last year. And
I guess, yeah.
so I remember going over each one of those, and Dragon Rob and everybody through that stuff, so.
I'm just checking to make sure that we're behind them for what we budgeted. So it sounds like we are.
Yep. Any other questions? Motion to approve contracts?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. All right. We're on to consent items. Gift acceptance, Natural Resources Department, and Health Department. Thoughts or motion?
Motion to approve.
All
Accept.
those- Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes. We usually do a letter of thanks, I believe. All right, second consent item, this is A, B, and C, and D. Execution of documents for Harbor Fuel Oil Corporation for sale of real estate of bulk fuel storage facility at 11 Industrial Road.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passed unanimously.
No, I'm abstaining. I
I'm
didn't.
sorry.
Yeah, there was one change on it. I wasn't. I'm abstaining. It's fine.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to mention again, thank you to Harbor Fuel for working on this for us for such a long time. I think we mentioned this when the purchase and sale agreement was approved back in January 2016. This is the culmination of a very, very long process, at least 30 years. So just, it's notable, that's my point.
Nice work to everybody who,
And the culmination will be when the tanks downtown are moved.
Yes, yeah, true.
That will be the culmination.
so that passed forward.
4-0.
4-0, abstain, okay. All right, Citizen Department request for appointment of constable for a 3-year term.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Request for waiver of town noise bylaw from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. for a wedding ceremony to be held Saturday, September 15th at 3 Reeds Way.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
I have to abstain from the next one because it's
You're going?
my brother's wedding.
Oh.
Okay. I guess that's reason. All right, request for waiver of town noise bylaw from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. for wedding reception to be held Saturday, October 6th at 33 Rhode Island Avenue.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes 4-0. Okay, now we're going to go to select board comments. Number 2, request for authorization of improvements to public roadways pursuant to planning board special permits, conditions for Richmond Great Point Development Project off Old South Road. Libby, you were going to get us started there?
I'll get you started on this, yes, and I know there are people here who can also speak on it. I think we all know we're basically familiar with this project off of Old South Road. The planning board, there's a memo in your packet about it, but the planning board has approved a series of 3 special permits for this project, and among all of those permits are requirements for various types of roadway improvements within the public right-of-way. Those are to be, in order for them to occur, must be accepted by the board, and then there's a process that follows the construction and the ultimate acceptance and modification of the roadway. The improvements have all been vetted by the plan engineer secured by the planning board, who is here tonight, Ed Pesci, as well as the DPW director. I think they could speak to any of the specifics about the improvements. The applicant, Richmond reps are here as well, if there are any questions of them. And there are a number of documents in your packet about this. I think the intent is that if the board were so inclined, the improvements would be approved to proceed tonight pending the completion of a memorandum of understanding, which is being finalized now with town council and the Richmond council. And I expect that to be concluded very shortly, within the next, hopefully, week or so, possibly. And I think we're ready for any questions.
Any questions from the board for Libby, town council, Mr. McNeil, Ed?
I had a more general question, I think, just related to understanding where we're at with the number of units that are contributing to the SHI list. And I noticed specifically in some of these documents that it said that the phasing of those affordable units was completely up to the discretion of the developer. So I'm just wondering where we're at. And I'm not sure who's best to answer that, but I'm just wondering where we're at with that. I don't know.
I think Richmond probably could answer that, and maybe, where'd Andrew go? The Director of Planning could confirm or speak to it as well.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, staff, council. Dave Arminetti, Director of Real Estate Development for Richmond Great Point Development and the Richmond Company, Inc. Good to be before you this evening on this aspect of the project. And affordable housing is obviously a large component of our current housing initiatives. The apartments, which are 225 units called our Meadows 2 apartments, includes 57 statutorily AMI income limited affordable units, but the town will get credit for all 225 of those units on the SHI list once building permits are issued. And then we have 94 single-family lots, 91 of which are ours, 3 of which are being exchanged back to Housing Nantucket in the land exchange we completed with them a couple of years ago. There are 23 affordable single-family home lots that will be developed with AMI restricted homes. And if the board and the community remembers at town meeting in 2015, when our warrant articles were approved, we created 2 levels or tranches of affordability for the single-family homes. There's 16 traditional 80% AMI restricted units, and then 7 175% AMI restricted units. So in total, we'll have 16 for sale units that will get on the SHI list and 225 rental units that will get on the SHI list. As to phasing and timing, obviously we understand the priority and the crisis in the community. We're attempting to be proactive in every way we can to get those delivered as soon as possible, not just for statistical purposes, but to provide housing to the community, which is so critical. We've been through the planning board process. We're at the very end of the HDC process for both our apartments and single family homes. We actually have a hearing tomorrow where I believe the last 2 of our 10 apartment prototypes are expected to be approved. Once that happens, as the board's aware and the staff is well aware, you have to have HDC approval as a precedent to submitting for building permits. Once we have that in hand, we'll immediately submit for building permits within a matter of hopefully weeks and proceed. The phasing in general, there are provisions in the MOU that we executed with the board back in 2015 that speak to some phasing. There also was a phasing plan that was approved by the planning board when we obtained our special permit approvals that Mrs. Gibson referenced back in January and February of 2017. So that phasing was agreed upon by the planning board and us, consistent with our MOU that the board signed. The first phase, as it turns out, will end up being a total of 98 units, 25% of which will be statutorily affordable, the remainder will be market rate. Those we're applying for building permits immediately, and those will all be constructed in a single phase over the next 8 to 10 months and occupied in a kind of a rolling fashion. All 18 of those buildings that comprise those 98 units will not be constructed quite at the same time. There'll be a little bit of a phasing within the phase. We'll start 3 or 4 foundations immediately, then move on to the next 3 or 4. So in the span of about 10 months, essentially all 98 of those units will be completed, ready for occupancy. The town, as I understand it, and Attorney Giorgio can certainly speak to this, would get credit on the SHI list, at least as we understand it, and our general counsel here, Andrew Burek, can also answer questions on that, upon the issuance of building permits for those units. So when we get building permits for our first 98 units, which we expect in a matter of weeks, depending on the timing with the building department and some other things that we don't control 100% of, but we're going to continue to work cooperatively with the town on, we would get credit, or the town would get credit for all 98 of those units on the SHI list, which the question people ask is, how does that relate to safe harbor under Mass General Law? And as I understand it, that would give the town 2 years consecutively of short-term safe harbor under the provisions of Mass General Law. So that's our intended goal. The town staff have certainly been great in pushing all this along. If I could digress just briefly, the only thing I would comment on, given that a couple of the key town department heads are in the room today, and key town consultants, Mr. Pesci, Mr. McNeil, Mr. Gray, Chief Murphy. This was a pretty exhaustive review of these improvements. It's a big project for the town. It's an important project for us. There were a lot of iterations of the design, and it was very productive, very cooperative. It's going to improve traffic out there a lot. It's going to improve the aesthetics a lot. We have landscape medians that are incorporated in this, paving components. One of the examples, I think, where everybody worked well together for the benefit of the community at the end was in the original design, there were some paved shoulders on the road. Those have now been modified to become pervious geogrid grass shoulders. And an example of that cooperation was Chief Murphy was able to get comfortable with the structural integrity of that geogrid grass system, that emergency vehicles could get up on it. And that obviously reduces the impervious surface, is better for the environment, better for drainage. So it was a very good iterative process, and we're excited to get going, moving forward and make these improvements. So thank you.
Does that answer your question, Rita?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to speak specifically to the phasing question, there is a control condition in the Andrew Biergum, the general counsel for Richmond Company and Richmond Great Point Development, members of the board. To the phasing question more specifically, there's a control condition that was issued as part of the special permits, which controls the issuance of certificates of occupancy. So the occupancy won't outweigh the affordability in any sort of meaningful way. Meaning, for every 2 certificates issued for a market rate unit, 1 needs to be issued for an affordable for the rentals, and it's sort of mirrored consistently for the single-family homes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, isn't it 24 units, 26 units to get 1 year of safe harbor? Is that?
Yeah.
24.
24.
So if we're doing 90, was 18, but 96 accounting, 98 accounting, we're close, that would be close to 4 years if I'm doing my math right.
But do they do?
I think Attorney Giorgio can probably answer this much better. I think there's an issue of consecutive periods under the short-term safe harbor that comes into play here, but he can certainly advise the board better than we can on that. I think it's 2 is the maximum. It's our understanding.
I'm not sure that. Yeah, they carry over. It doesn't buy you more time.
Would we want to sequence it and do half at a time then? Would we want to do, instead of putting, if it's going to take how long to do it, would there be an advantage to sequencing half of it and the other half and getting 4 years of protection versus 2?
Think of it.
And I'm sure that was discussed at the planning level. I'm not.
It was, and I can speak to that point briefly, Mr. Fee. The good news, I guess, is right behind these first 98 units are another, my University of Connecticut math is correct, 126 units, and those will be broken up into at least 2 phases. So I think if we do work together sufficiently, we'll be able to get 4, maybe 5 years of short-term safe harbor ultimately.
Right, and your total number is
225 rental units, all of which will go on the shy list, but only 57 of which, or 25, will be actually statutorily AMI restricted, and then 16 shy list single-family homes. So a total of 242.
241.
That's correct.
So, 241. So it's okay.
So for the next 4 years, over the next
241,
4
I'm sorry.
years.
I think overall it gets us to about 8% of the 10% we need. If I'm
Very close, 7.8, so round up to 8, sure. A lot.
a good chunk.
Your thoughts
Can
or
I-
questions? Sorry.
I was just going to make a motion.
Well, before we make a motion, one of my questions was, are all the conditions and provisions currently met on all the various agreements? I guess that's you guys, and then it's for our staff to answer.
I charge Phil $1 every time I have to get up and down. So, to that point, I believe you're speaking primarily, Mr. Fee, about the MOU between ourselves and the town. which
Any of the
has-
agreements, any of the town agreements that we've made
Sure.
with you guys,
So we
through the
essentially
planning
have the
department or us.
MOU that was executed just before the 2015 special town meeting. That has about 20 provisions in it that are requirements for the developer, and I think 4 or 5 that are requirements for the town. As coincidence would have it, only about 60 days ago, we went over those exhaustively, actually with Tucker Holland, when we were kind of talking about housing and timing and phasing, to Ms. Higgins' point. So at that point, I can tell you with absolute certainty, we were in compliance with all of those provisions, as was the town. I'm not aware of any that we're not out of compliance on. There are some that have not been achieved yet, but the timeframes that are provided for in that agreement that allow for those achievements are still active, if you will. And then in terms of our conditions of our planning board permits and our ministerial permits, such as street opening permit with the DPW department, I'm not aware of any non-compliance or failure to comply at all. Certainly, there's a handful of department heads here who work with us almost on a daily basis, and Mrs. Gibson that could speak to that maybe, but I'm the point person who usually gets the phone call if we have done something or haven't done something right, and I'm not aware of anything.
But to Matt's point, I think we need the town manager to give us.
Yeah, the town
some
manager or the
guidance on
planning
that.
department to tell us that we're okay, make sure it's been looked at.
I haven't had a chance to meet with Tucker about this, but I did glance through the agreement today, and we have been discussing this for about a year now. And my understanding is pretty well, as Mr. Arminetti has laid it out, they are in compliance with the items that were supposed to have already happened. There are some items that just haven't come about yet. I had some minor questions that I don't want to get into right at the moment because I haven't had a chance to talk to Tucker yet, but I had suggested that he and I and Dave and whoever else meet to confirm everything. But it's a good question that we'll nail down.
Okay. Well, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the road improvements to proceed. Thought.
A second.
Any discussion? Do we need to say anything subject to the MOU? Do we need that in the motion? Is that,
I don't know.
no? Okay, all those in favor?
But, I'm sorry,
Oh, sorry.
but there should be an understanding that there will be an MOU that will contain all of this in one document.
Subject to the execution of an MOU.
So the motion should say
I'll
that.
include that in my motion,
Okay,
subject
thank
to
you.
the execution of a satisfactory MOU.
Any other discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I'm abstaining or opposed. I'd like to know that that stuff is done prior to voting on something. I've also asked, multiple times, what are the costs to the town? What are the benefits to the town? Where's the list? I would like to see that before tonight or before executive session. And I've been asking for that consistently for 2 years and I haven't seen it. So, it's nothing against you guys. It's part of our process. And so where's our side of it? So it may be against you if we actually got it. So I can't support it without the proper documentation. Thank you.
Just to, not to prolong this, but there is a memo from Mr. Pesci in the packet that gives an overview of the improvements for this particular part of the project.
I read that, and that was about 3 million for roads.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other, it's when you're doing something like this, you need to know what are you giving and what are you getting, and that should be in a simple format that everybody can understand. And I think that has been asked multiple times. When I was co-chair on the board, we asked the planning department to provide it to us. To the best of my knowledge, we have yet to see it, and I have a hard time, without seeing that. I have a hard time knowing how to negotiate on the next MOU. What's the proper process is. And so I think we're voting on something with I don't want to vote with incomplete information. Thank you.
Well, I took some comfort in that it's subject to the MOU. And so I think all those things should come out. I know we've been talking about this for years.
Yeah.
We still haven't gotten what you've been asking for in a format that, we can all understand. So that's really what my vote meant.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and that's fine. If we get it, if I get the information needed to make an intelligent vote, I will then vote. But I can't do that right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to head over back to public hearings. So I'd like to open the public hearing to consider application for mobile food unit for Lola Burger, LLC DBA Lola Burger. This is continued from August 22nd, 2018 meeting.
Am I going to abstain again?
Okay. Matt's going to abstain.
Okay.
Good evening.
Hello.
Bill, do you want to go?
Well, we're just saying that we're revisiting this from last time. The question was asked in the application for the mobile food unit for Lola Burger as far as the parking. Obviously, wondering if it was going to be at that location or another location. So we do have an update as we provided in the packet. And their attorney, Mr. Swain, can address that as well for the address at 57 Surfside Road with Miles Reese Trucking as far as the parking.
That's great.
Good evening. For the record, Brian Swain, attorney for Lola Burger. As you are aware, this application is for a mobile food unit. It was carried over due to parking concerns. My client has secured parking off-site. There are certain Board of Health regulations that require that the truck be cleaned on premises. As you'll see in my letter, my client proposes to clean the truck outside the business hours of Lola, so it won't disrupt or disturb any parking. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I think it's clear that people are going to see the truck there. It's going to be clean. It's going to be stocked with food.
Yeah.
It's just not going to be parked there at night and during the day when it's not used.
Yeah, the intent was to be fully transparent and let you know it will be there, however, just periodically and for a very specific duration of time, only for cleaning. Other than that, it will be off-site.
Any questions? Thoughts?
I'm happy
I
with
would
that.
just say during their licensing that, to make sure that the planning board special permit is okay, is fine with the terms.
Yep, we can have them sign off on that prior to issuing the license with the other departments as well.
Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh. Oh.
Nope.
Right off the bat. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak on this matter from the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion from the board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Thank you, Erica.
That's what a couple
you.
weeks
Thank
off
you.
does.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to open a public hearing to consider application for a public assembly permit for 2019 Nantucket Wine and Food Festival to be held May 15th to the 19th, 2019 at Jetties Beach parking lot for Bathing Beach Road.
Yes, hello.
Amy?
So, as we discussed, I believe, in June about the wine festival, we agreed that we would come back and probably give an overview of the wine festival in general, its impact on the community, and any issues or concerns we had from this year and moving forward. In addition, this evening, and we did provide some of that information, in addition this evening, the organizers of the event are here applying for a public assembly permit for Jetties Beach parking lot area, as that is public property in our large events, per regulations, anything over 250 people requires a public assembly permit to be approved by the select board. So that is the main goal of this evening, is to discuss that, discuss the conditions for that permit. Again, thank you for doing this early. The organizers do need to do this early to secure vendors and such, and they also organize a Newport Wine and Food Festival that is in 2 weeks. So we appreciate you hearing this tonight as well. As we provided in the report, we provided all the numbers. I want to recognize Marina Dvoznik, which I probably said her name very badly there, our new event coordinator who started this spring and gathered all this information and issues these permits. So I'm just the talking head. I appreciate everything that she put together here. She went to the airport and Highline and the boats, and to give you a picture of kind of what traffic we see that weekend, and talk to all these types of vendors and the Lodging Association to understand the impact, as we had discussed, financial impact and such. So we do have, obviously the big picture is it's a great weekend for all of them. It's our first weekend of the year that this really becomes an impact. A lot of the restaurants opening as well. So I don't know if you have any questions on what was provided, the number of events that they have. It goes beyond, obviously, the Jetties Beach parking lot area that we're discussing this evening. Those types of permits happen throughout the year. They're mostly at licensed facilities like the White Elephant, Nantucket Hotel. We work on that with them as they do their planning throughout the year. Also, they do things at private homes as well. So those types of permits go on throughout the year. This evening, we're really just looking at that one public assembly permit for your approval so that they can move forward with their planning for the year. So are there any questions as far as the numbers, the impact that you'd like to discuss? Yeah.
Did they give any consideration to the discussion of a date change? so that we're not
I
so
will-
taxed?
Correct. So what I will do is, I think for that discussion, I know we've talked about that, is I will kind of present our overview of what happened, what some of our conditions are. We have the organizers here this evening, and I'll have them speak to that and speak to any sort of conditions of that sort, if that's okay, because they would have to answer that. Certainly, we can move. The tennis courts aren't used really frequently that time of year, so we're able to move different times. There's something that may happen the following weekend that we couldn't do, but if you want to do it earlier, we can certainly discuss that. But I will have them address their ability to do that.
And also, do we have the resources? We might the week before. for
Correct.
Public safety and whatever else we're not thinking of.
Correct. If we're just talking a week and we're talking in May for us, it's not that we staff up around then. Obviously, with police, we staff up more in June. DPW, it's going to be the same type of situation, obviously, and we're not pushing tennis out or anything of that sort. So I think that would be fine for us. I'll have them address it as far as what might be in the way of them changing the date, other events, things of that sort. So I think they have a more detailed answer to that on their side to consider.
And that's what you're thinking, Don, like a week earlier?
I'm thinking it's really incredibly taxing on the island to have these two big party weekends back to
I was
back.
going to use a different word, but
It's become a little out of control, and
Yeah.
I don't want to be the complete damper on it, but it's
Right.
just it's really hard on the island.
It's something, yeah, we could talk about for a lot of events. But again, and if we want to talk about this now, I'll have them address that directly now. For us, it would be fine to move. Again, for this particular part of it, outside, different things of that sort, but for the entire event, would you like to address that right now while we're talking about it? Of Nancy being the organizer to discuss that.
Hi. So in theory, I think moving it a weekend earlier from our perspective wouldn't be an issue. But some of the things that we have to consider would be the island isn't really opened yet, even a week before. So meaning when I say the island, I mean the island is open, but the participants in the festival, so that the restaurants, probably more than 3/4 of them aren't even open. That participate in the festival even a week before. They're kind of pulling it together. Oh, was I not leading enough? Pulling it together to be opened. It's sort of, that's their goal, is to kind of get it open for the weekend of festival. The only other challenges are, it's a weather a little bit less predictable and things like that, but we could move it earlier. It is Mother's Day that weekend before, which is a little bit taxing on people's participation, and that's a consideration. And I think just maybe with a little bit more, like an entire year in advance, to be able to say, and we will be doing this. We've been doing it the same weekend for 22 years. So to give people sort of warning, a lot of the participants, like wineries and visiting restaurants and winemakers that come, they kind of have that on their annual calendar pretty far in advance. I think it's something that if we at the festival announced, we are going to be doing this a week earlier, make sure you plan accordingly, both to the town, to Nantucket, to the people coming from off island, that is something that could be considered. It doesn't change us so much, other than the fact that it's Mother's Day weekend. So.
But we discussed this in June, and we basically said, take the next 3 or 4 months, tell us how you're going to make improvements so the things we were concerned about didn't happen. And we asked, and we talked about changing the date. And so now to hear that, we need more. So
No, actually, so all of those action items that you asked us to do, we spent hours and hours and hours and days and months and putting that together, and we submitted it. Every single thing, addressing every single concern, everything that was a challenge, things that we can improve, everything, every one of those, and back and forth with Amy and her team, and then submitted it full on, and it's been a part of what's been presented to you all. In terms of the date change, it would be very difficult for us to change this date, given that it's been on people's agendas, if we didn't announce it going into the actual festival. So to talk about it in June and people get sort of invited to save the date actually on their way in to come to the island to do this because it takes us a full year of planning to pull it together. So, that's our answer to it. I think there's a lot of people that it would affect other than just us planning to be able to do that. I think the biggest one being the island inns, the island restaurants, all of those who love to be a part of this and that it is important for them to, cutting their off time by a week and coming back earlier. So there's a lot of people to communicate with to make that happen.
I just wanted to address that one question since that came up as to why we didn't. And, in Nancy's point too, I went through a lot of different other wine festivals, and it's pretty much a year-round business. There's one, Aspen, Portland, wherever. So it is a bit difficult to kind of shift that around. So that's kind of why that wasn't really done, because there were a lot of different things with their vendors. That would have been a problem.
I think it's a
So,
worthy.
yeah, go ahead,
I
sorry.
think it's a worthy conversation to have
Yeah.
on the date. I think I'm more concerned about getting the event to keep it successful for the island as an economic driver. The event is successful, but it's within the frame that you, public safety, town administration, whatever you're asking for is done.
Right.
So I, first went off to like, well, what are the incentives for this festival to do what you're asking them to do?
Right.
Like, can we find them $100,000? I'm just making a,
Right.
an extreme, and we can't do that. We can't. That's not an
Right.
option.
Right.
So what leverage do we have to get this festival to kind of respect the community, keep them profitable and everything they're doing?
Right.
I think the only answer is not give a permit for Jetties Beach. That's the only leverage that we have.
Correct.
Am I right?
Correct. As far as, yeah, and maybe, I'm sorry we put kind of a little cart before the horse there. And I can certainly, if you prefer, let's just go over this year, maybe some of the issues we asked them to address and go from there and then add that
think
for
that
there. Go ahead.
That would be helpful.
Okay.
Or just me. 'cause-
Yeah.
'cause
I just wanted to.
that was where we kind of left the conversation.
Correct.
Yeah, and also
Yeah.
I think it's
Yep.
helpful for the public
Yes.
to hear it. It's we're on
Yes.
TV,
Yep.
and then this is a public hearing, so we'd like to hear other people. I think before we start
Correct.
to pontificate on something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you want to go over the main
yeah.
issues you had with this previous year, how it's going to be fixed, and then we can decide.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to make sure you had no questions on the whole scope of the event that we gave you and all the events and understand that focus. Okay. Great. So as we did, we kind of gave you some overview of the events, the Jetties Beach event plan and the photos that kind of went through that. Basically, they start setting up around Monday or Tuesday of that week, and they have 3 days of events, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If we go a little bit further, we have photos of kind of what we're looking at. It's a culinary tent that you can see there. They have breakfast buffet where they have food events in that one tent, exhibitor tent where they have a lot of vendors, a lot of local folks, stores, things of that sort that, whether it's clothes or food and different things of that item in the exhibitor tent there. They have the stage as well where they do cooking demonstrations and such. Chef's tent, which is, obviously they're just preparing foods and that sort of thing. So they have a multitude of events throughout the weekend. In that whole parking lot plan. So it's just the whole parking lot there, entrance in the beginning. Is that fast forwarded? No. Okay. Can we go to the pictures? So as you see here, this is where the vendors are, the exhibitors tent. So this is kind of what we're setting up. There is alcohol in here, different places that they can sample things of that sort. And then throughout, and then the other photos we flip through. As you can see here throughout the weekend, all sorts of different entertainment. This was kind of a mobile vodka truck in the back. This is obviously they do cooking demonstrations of such. This here is kind of one of the issues that we'll discuss as far as the parking and transportation that was coming in as people were leaving and going. It was a little bit all over the place. So there's kind of photos of what the area I'm discussing as well. So basically, and then we had the white elephant. I included something that we sent during the week of this event. This was the Friday evening or the Saturday of the event this year, which basically outlines the issues that we had this year. We had a large number of people constantly leaving the tent with alcohol. Obviously, public consumption of alcohol is not allowed. Leaving the licensed premises is not allowed. It was constant. I stayed with the police details that week. That was a huge problem that we had with folks leaving. No one was stopping them. It was police officers and myself stopping them, making them pour out alcohol. We had issues with folks going into Sandbar Restaurant with open alcohol or bottles of wine that threatens their license. Things of that sort. That was one big problem that we identified on that weekend as well. It shouldn't be to the police officers and such to ask people to pour out alcohol, and it got a little messy at times for that.
Can I make a point there?
Yes.
How many transgressions?
Oh, too many for me to tell you.
Okay, and so my point is, we have some people coming up later that have they did one thing wrong or
Right.
two things wrong, and they're coming up and they're going to be, some of them are going to be shut down most likely. I have to recuse myself on a lot of them, but and a lot of them. So I just think, the same rules have to apply.
Right,
We
correct.
can't have one rule for all our license holders
Right.
and be really tough on them, and have another rule for something that's growing into this, this very big, very, very,
Yes.
very drunk weekend.
Correct.
And so I think we have to realize that that there should be, the same rules should apply.
Correct.
That's just maybe is that common sense or? Okay.
I think that's our goal, and from what I had given them, I would like some teeth behind some of these permits with these conditions and no more strikes, no more permits with this. I want to give them a path to approval, but with stronger conditions, so that I have teeth to say no more.
So I'm looking in the packet
Correct.
for the because we heard from the applicant they submitted a lot of information.
Yes.
So what are they going to do that will give you, as the licensing administrator,
Right.
whatever title is, confidence, absolute confidence that alcohol will not be leaving the premises?
Well, we discussed.
And where is it in the packet?
Yep. Their information they submitted is at the end of the packet where I put their application, event proposal, what they gave us, and the map, the new map that
I read
outlines
that.
this.
I didn't see a guarantee.
No, a guarantee. Basically, what's going to happen is any transgressions, or if we have issues such that I outlined that weekend this year, is what we'll discuss this evening, pulling the permit, or in future, as I suggested, 5 years they can't come back for a permit for that location.
Could you,
yeah.
could you pull the permit, sorry, Jim, on a Friday night, so you could close it down Saturday
If
and
there are
Sunday?
conditions, I think that I feel comfortable that we have specifically outlined. I certainly threatened that this year, but I didn't feel I had enough teeth or had something in writing that I felt that would be appropriate. So I sent that email Friday night and addressed it with them on site.
So I'm still looking in here for
Yep.
where it says that they will provide a guarantee that people will not be leaving their event with alcohol.
So I'll have them address that in a second.
Okay.
I've asked them several things. And there were several other issues that I had with it. The things that we need are perimeter security. There were not people at every entrance to this event. There needs to be specific entrances. People were kind of gathering everywhere. I need to have someone who will respond to me immediately all the time. I didn't have that. I sent that email and that information. I wasn't responded
And
to.
where is that in here that they're responding to that? terms
It's
of
in
your-
there. It's in their outline as far as
Okay, will
having.
I can't. I've been looking for it. I can't find
Sure.
it. In terms of perimeter, I see they're hiring private security staff to
Correct.
secure the perimeters in all areas. Is that what they're?
Yep, is hiring additional security staff, having someone that is actually overseeing that site that can actually respond to us and has the ability to respond to that immediately. And I can have her answer this as well. As far as a guarantee, we're going to have to put strong conditions on here that if that isn't addressed, I have the ability to take action.
Yeah.
That's what I really would like to have support behind that, because, we've given them that support to do. They recognize that there were challenges to this event. When I sent this information out that day, I had to go on site to find someone to see if they saw it. They did. They didn't respond to me at that time. And I felt that the people at Jetties Beach didn't have the resources to respond. You know, I continually was able to get in and out of those tents. I went into storage. I took alcohol out to see if I can get it out. I could. Things of that sort were troubling. And the issues that Sandbar was having with people coming in too as well, it wasn't respectful of them. And it put their license at risk. Go ahead.
Does Sandbar open on the 15th?
They opened that weekend.
So if it was a week earlier, it would not have any disruption of the family-friendly restaurant.
Most likely. They are certainly willing to work with them on events. They have started to open that weekend. And I'll tell you what worked out for them was it wasn't a nice weekend. If it had been a beautiful weekend, it would have been slammed. There was no parking. There were a lot of event trucks parked in their area that we tried to get moved and didn't. So things of that sort, absolutely no festival parking in that area. Signage in all of those tents for people leaving, about no alcohol leaving. There was no signage of that sort. Things of those sort need to happen at these types of venues. That's the only thing we can ask.
What if it is? What if it is a beautiful weekend and there's a million kids down there, and there's people coming out of here and driving?
Right.
I mean, I know they're not supposed to be doing that, but it could I'm really concerned about this location.
And you're saying they have a vodka truck?
That's what that mobile unit was. It was
Okay.
Tito's
Oh, I
vodka.
thought
it was in
it's
the
not
back
dri-
of the tents.
Okay.
You know, it
they're not driving
wasn't
around
oh,
there. Okay.
oh no, I would not have a job if that had happened. No, it was on the licensed premises, but that's just what.
So
that
they
was.
had no signage that said no alcohol behind this point?
No.
Okay, well,
And there wasn't
I
constant
just don't know how
security
you
with
could, run. Oh,
It may not, and they may fall down. I don't know. These are things that they need to have. We actually did
Well, they
discuss
should have
last
had-
year.
they should have
Oh,
had.
absolutely. We did have a meeting with every single department on this perimeter security, and it's not just them. We've had this issue with other events. We need to really have a lot of teeth behind these permits as far as what actions we can take on site and as a sanction. I don't know what I'm doing here. It's making that noise. But that's what we need. I can't guarantee you they're not going to fall down on these issues again. I'm giving them a way to get there, to get to that path to support this event, and that's what we can do. That transportation has to be organized. There needs to be a transportation manager, that there's not people going in and out while people are walking in and out, and Uber's dropping off, and Cranberry Transportation stepped up and started to organize it by the end, but things of that sort. We can't have random vehicles all over the place going back behind these tents with people drinking. Yeah.
So just a reminder, this is we're just looking at Jetties,
Correct.
right? We're not talking about
Correct.
anything happens to White Elephant or anywhere else.
Correct.
This is the first year it's been at Jetties.
That is correct.
Okay.
This was their first year. We have met several times, and they did acknowledge that, there's things they can do better. That's clear. We didn't have, disagreement on that factor. And we laid out those things, the transportation, the alcohol leaving, having, one person that I can contact and that is in charge of this, and having the resources and staff they need to address this. They are going to cut off access to the tent, so there's only one specific access per ticket to the tent. It was very loose last year, things of that sort, making dedicated pathways to those tents so that people aren't wandering. Signage, staffing, security at each entrance, and a better system as far as tracking them. And at the end of the day, those are the things that we need. And behind that, we need sanctions and conditions and the ability to pull it if that isn't met. I think that's the best that we can offer.
I have a question for
Nancy?
the applicant. With all these restrictions and ask of town officials, can the event still be successful? Can you still meet your goals and your? I mean, is like, what, this is going to cost us $30,000 more to do what you're asking, that we just can't do it,
Right.
or it's too big.
No, it absolutely could be successful that way. And just to speak to this a little bit, as Amy said, there wasn't one piece of this that was brought to our attention that we didn't notice, that we didn't know about when this happened. It was a growth spurt that had a little that surprised us, quite frankly, because we know we're very good event producers. We've been producing this for a long time. Everything we do at the White Elephant or at the Nantucket Hotel or in the private homes or anywhere right now is so tight and secure, and we don't have issues. And there's not, we respond every year to things that can be done better and better and to improve it and to make it safer and better run. But it's very, very tight. And what we did at Jetties, we've done the culinary tent for several years, but it's been kind of a smaller piece, a necessary piece because it's affordable programming. It's more community-oriented or very community-oriented. It's been an important piece. We had it at Children's Beach. We had it at the tent moved to the Nantucket Yacht Club. Then it was at the White Elephant Residences. We were sort of vagabonding around and looking for a more secure place for it to be and to build. And we didn't really anticipate that it would be as popular, as well-received, as crowded as it was at Jetties. We were not prepared. And so our staff, we didn't have enough staff. We didn't have enough security. We didn't. And we know that. And we view all the items that need to be addressed as very simple to address. And should we have done better last year at this? Absolutely, we should have. And it got away from us because it was bigger than we anticipated. And the boundaries of Jetties in that area, we didn't realize how accessible they could be up and over the dunes or what have you. But it's easy to secure the area. It's easy to fence off the entire thing and to enter through one area down closer to at the end of the driveway. So you can't even come in and can't walk past it in either direction without going through this entrance area. That's easy to make happen. We didn't have that last year. And, we know we had extended hours for the tents in past years because they weren't quite as popular, quite frankly, and the time frame was longer, so we could make sure that the vendors and the community folks who were in there had enough people coming to participate and to buy goods or to sample, and those hours need to be shortened because we are bringing the people in, so it doesn't need to go on for as long, so shorter sessions and things like that really from my perspective, from our perspective, are really easy, and we would be comfortable, of course, with a guarantee. Or an understanding that if this doesn't happen, then we're going to lose it. And we don't want to lose it because it's a very important component. We're a wine and food festival, and this is a huge piece of our food programming with all the culinary demonstrations and everything. So we don't want to lose it. And if we get the opportunity to do it again, all these pieces that we're proposing will be in place. And if something goes wrong, then we understand that that's in jeopardy.
Thank you. Rita, do you have any thoughts, questions?
I was just going to ask Amy, so we are treating this as sort of a one strike, you're out situation.
Yes.
And the only other thing I noticed was that some of the permit conditions, it mentioned that they would be applied to other events as well.
Correct, and I think that's important. I think it's something Marina and I are working on as far as updating those event policies and such that we have that. We've been working towards, and I talked to Brian about this too, as well as having more appropriate event contracts and things of that sort, so that we, like I keep saying, having more teeth behind these things, but having something more substantial behind them too as well. So it's not just targeting this one event; it's something we really need to have across the board. That'll help us. It'll allow them to be successful, but also give us some of that guarantee for some respect for the community at that point.
And do you feel like for other events, it sort of feels like the Wine and Food Festival has been given a sort of written warning, and then
Yes.
now it's your one strike, you're out. Do you feel like imposing this on other events that maybe haven't had these kind of restrictions? Do you see there being at least a little leeway?
Correct. I mean, something like this can be serious as far as some of these alcohol violations and things of that sort. At the end of the day, we're not going to be canceling the entire event. We're just saying, you know what, this location, this is town property. These rules need to be respected. Certainly, I would give them a warning if on Friday I started to see stuff. I'd say, hey, you know what, A, B, and C, this needs to tighten up now. I feel like if that warning wasn't heeded immediately, then we would have to do something.
But that's what happened this past year.
Correct.
You sent an email and you heard nothing back.
No.
That's why I don't
But I
want-
did go, and we did talk in person, and we did.
Okay.
By the end of the weekend, it got a bit better.
Okay.
It just was frustrating because I felt like I was leaving something going on that could get us in trouble.
This, I'm wondering if anyone from the public, this is a public hearing, and before we, I think we're getting into the discussion about it. I would love to know if anyone here from the public is here to discuss this. And I have any input. Did anyone come for this specific reason? Or about any dates or impacts on businesses or what we've seen?
You have to come down to the.
You have to come to the mic, yeah.
So
Now, I
this
would
is-
just like to, if it's a public hearing, I'd like to hear from the public a
This is
little bit.
only about Jetties Beach, right?
And this
It
is,
is, but this is, it's part of it.
hold on, I just want to, hey, Terry,
from Yoshi's.
Terry, I just want to frame that this is the public assembly for Jetties Beach, not the entire wine festival.
Oh, well,
No, you can still,
you can still say something.
you can still speak, Terry.
Well, about the date.
If you want to talk about the date, that's fine.
It impacts what we're talking about.
Please, go ahead. I'm just kind of do that, not just for everybody who was going to speak.
I'm Terry from Yoshi's. We have been in business all 25 years that Nancy's been doing this. And it is a great boost to revenue for us that weekend. It seems that that isn't broken, but I wouldn't want to jeopardize losing 25% of the volume if you switch it to an earlier date. I don't know if an experimentation is going to help bring my bank account up quicker, you know? So the date is in everybody's head. It's already planted there. Maybe the Fagawi seems to be getting better and better every year. But the date's pretty important to us, staffing-wise, you know. That's all.
So you think it would hurt your revenue if it was pushed
Why
back a
chance
week?
it? Well, I mean, I don't know. If we lose 10% just by changing it, you know, why chance it? That's all.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Anyone else like to speak? Mark, please state your name.
Mark Donato, and formerly the Sconset Market, Sconset Cafe. The moving of the date, I think, is really troublesome for the inns and the hotels here. I think that would be troublesome. The other point I want to make is that a number of us are in business here, and the government, with the J1 visas and H2Bs, is constantly pushing us back from the early starting date. It would make it very difficult for restaurants and inns to comply with that. So if there's a year lapse and we try and change the date and we move our dates, that's one thing. It would be very difficult this year, but in the future it possibly could happen. I think it would be a real detriment to the inns and the restaurants. I don't think they're getting their kitchen staff in that early. So that's my point.
Do we have a restaurant association? We do. Do they have, can we ask them for some input?
It's good.
I think, yeah, and it's gotten a little, it's getting back together. I think
But I
it
think-
was loose for a while.
But people have raised some interesting points. I mean,
Correct.
if it's busy one weekend and we move it back a weekend and then it's dead, you're going to pay people for, I mean,
Correct.
when does staffing start and those kinds
Susan
of things?
can, answer.
Hi, Susan Handy, Black Eyed Susan, Chanticleer, and treasurer of the Restaurant Association. We usually do meetings in the spring when we have kind of issues coming up. I don't think, I didn't realize that this was going on, or so involved with everything else that's going on in the summertime, so I'm glad I kind of was here this evening for it. I will call a meeting and see what everybody thinks about the timing. I know people have very specific ideas for their own businesses about how these types of events really do affect them or do not affect them, or I should say, don't really help them. Every event has kind of a different effect on a different style of restaurant that we have on the island. So I will be happy to, I don't know if this is your final discussion on this, but I will certainly get back to you all just as a matter of interest as to what the Restaurant Association might think about changing the date in the future. It seems like trying to change the date for next year would be very difficult. Just from a general planning point of view. But for future discussions, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll agree. I've heard, I speak to a fair number of restaurant people. Some people are very happy with this and they do great. There's others that say, as this has grown, it has hurt their businesses, that, people are not going out as much, or they're showing up and they're already really drunk, and so they're not even able to taste their meals. That's so, so there's a little bit of both on that. And, I agree we shouldn't change the date this year. I think, but I think we should put some teeth in it when we start to talk about that.
I've gotten the same exact feedback, both sides, and, the drinking and canceling reservations and things, and some people have trouble, and some obviously it works for them as well. And the visa portion was part of the argument I didn't hear. It certainly would help us to not have, to staff and have details 2 weekends in a row. However, it might not be possible this year.
Don, I do like your the point. I didn't really think about Sandbar. It's a family restaurant, and let's just assume it's going to be a nice sunny weekend. We have to assume that. And how are we going to really mitigate that? And I'm sure you thought about it, and I'm sure
Yes.
things could be done.
Correct, and they don't have a problem with the event being there. Again, it's wanting a bit more, working with them, respect for that location, and keeping that festival trucks, everything of such away, and having better policing of the alcohol and things of that sort to not put them in a sticky situation. So again, it's just demanding a little more respect for that and paying more attention to that. They're certainly willing to work with them on events and things of that sort, should that happen.
So last year was the first year for Jetties, right?
For Jetties, correct. In the past,
And this has been this is now 22 years.
correct. I think
And it's
they-
been,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I haven't come to my question
Yeah,
yet.
sorry.
It's more of a comment. So we've seen, it grow and grow and grow, and last year was a big bump. We had a real bad experience, but it had been successful in prior years. And I don't know if not doing Jetties for a year to make sure they've got other issues covered in other venues would be such a bad thing.
Yes,
That's
so
a
I
comment,
think.
just a comment.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Sorry about that. I think this has grown. They have had a culinary tent in various locations over the past few years. They had it on Children's Beach, obviously. We understand that history, and we don't allow alcohol in Children's Beach anymore. They've also had it at Nantucket Yacht Club on their lawn, a similar type of tent. Then they had it at the White Elephant Villages. That space became unavailable when they went into construction last year. I believe, and they can speak to this too, that Jetties was a great location for them. The location, having it away from other events, a nice location. It was easier maybe to control in that space. We think it can be, if managed properly. Be a space so it's not on top of everything else. You don't have people maybe walking around downtown as much with alcohol. So it could be a good space if managed properly. So this is part of the event that's gone on in different locations over the past, I don't know how many years they've been doing the culinary tent, but it's been a bit. So there's history to that. It just got a little bigger with this space this year.
Did we discuss this last year before it got put at Jetties? I don't remember talking about it.
It was.
It was not on my radar.
Yeah, I believe. No. Oh, we did through Park and Rec, and asked if it needed to be put on the schedule. It doesn't always need to be.
So it
A hearing?
didn't come before this board last year? Wow.
No.
That's those.
It's before us now.
Yeah.
You have a thought, man?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. And I support the event, but I'm not sure I support all these things just growing to the maximum size that they can be. I think that we have to, we have to think about it, because, when I grew up, there were these big beach parties, and you could run them for, these guys would come and run them for, 4 or 5 years, and they'd have to go to another place because it got so busy. And what we're doing now is, we have, 4th of July is nuts, and a lot of the adult parents won't come, older parents won't come out. They let their adult kids come down and wreak havoc on the island. Fagawi weekend, it's supposed to be Memorial Day, is the same thing. And, so now we're writing in stone that we have these huge party drinking weekends. We're the party capital of the East Coast. The kids, the frat kids are coming from up and down the East Coast for Memorial Day weekend. and it's nuts. I've got friends who have their adult kids, and the houses are full of kids, and it's a mess. And and I just think, we have to think long and hard. If we're going to do these things, we have to find a way to contain them and have them be positive influences for the island and be respectful drinking, not binge drinking. We were slow on Sunday. One of my employees, my kitchen guy, wahoo, I get to go down. Someone gave him a ticket. He went down. He came back 3 hours later, fell down the stairs, passed out, wasn't able to work for 2 days. And I'm not blaming the wine festival. He might have got overserved there. I'm blaming him, but that's the mentality that we have here now, and that's what we're dealing with. And is that what we want to encourage? I remember these things when they were, sort of low key, respectful, respectful events, and they're turning into some of them are turning into monster money makers. And is that representative of Nantucket? I think that's what we have to sort of really grapple with.
Yeah.
And it's difficult.
Right. We could all share our war stories. When we were living on Main Street at 11 o'clock or midnight, I got woken up and a group of people had walked into my kitchen and that weekend, and were convinced that this was their house. And I couldn't convince them otherwise. And I said, well, I think you want to go next door. And they're like, no, this is it. And so we finally called the police, and they came and they convinced them that this was not their house.
Yeah, that's a Nantucket problem for sure. Yeah.
It's the shingle house problem.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity as well, if it wasn't at Jetties, are there alternate locations where something like this could be held at this size?
We've had this discussion over the years. Certainly none of our property. We couldn't do it. Children's Beach, we wouldn't have any public property. It would have to be in a private facility. If something like Bartlett's Farm wanted to do it, certainly they have the space and they can put a tent there. And we would have to license it on a temporary basis like we do this. So they would have the ability to go to a private property or a licensed facility like they have the tenant White Elephant. As far as permitting, if it was a private property like Bartlett's that does not have a liquor license, there would be permits that we would have to give, so there would be ability there to kind of control that. But if they went to, again, like a yacht club or something like that, it's within their license to do so, to have a special event of that kind. So I think they like the seaside portion of it and things of that sort, and to not go inland or, I'm sure that's the part of it too that they like. But they did have that ability to do that.
And also, with it being the culinary tent, are most events still alcohol related?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So
I think they have a junior chef event. Obviously, that's for charity, and that is not. Obviously, we have youngsters in there doing that. And that's in that culinary tent, so it could be cut off from that as well. But yes, everything else
is alcohol.
Correct.
Yeah.
Public hearing is still open, so yeah.
My name's David Martin, and I bring a little bit different perspective on all of this. When you're talking about doing away with it or severely limiting it based on 1 year and how it went the 1 year that it was held there. My wife is the dock master for the boat basin, and she's extensively involved in Fagawi every year. I've been here for 35 years now, and I remember years ago the bad old days of Fagawi when it was out of control, and they were read the Bryant Act, and there were severe limitations that were addressed to them, and they were told, if you can't get it together, we're going to shut you down. So what they did is they went and they got it together. And that's why the participants in the Fagawi aren't the troublemakers. It's the employees that somehow, not with Fagawi, but somehow get into these other events and cause the issues. It's not necessarily, and for the most part, it's not the guests. It's the hangers-on. If there's some way that you could make it so that the tickets are non-transferable, that might help. That's what basically they did with Fagawi, and they shut it off for purchase of tickets that weekend. So I'd like to see these people be given a second chance, but I think we've been told that they need more teeth. Give them more teeth. Let them try it, and if that doesn't work, use your teeth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? It's a pleasure of the board. Would like to close the hearing, deliberate?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right, we'll close the public hearing. And any discussion or thoughts from the board? We can still ask Amy questions if we need to.
I think Don, you bring up a good point about the location. And I don't know if, given the opportunity to change the date versus change the location of the culinary tent, if the changing the date does seem like, after this many years and with the staffing and timing of when, I know most restaurants do try and staff, it's close to Fagawi, so I don't know how that would pan out. But I'm feeling, despite how many transgressions, giving them a second chance that get it right, one strike you're out. I do think that a lot of the issues do seem to have been addressed in the plan that they put forward.
I guess my thoughts on the date change sort of made sense because I feel like the island really opens for Daffodil. A lot of the restaurants open, not all of them. But most people have their staff, and if anyone has any hope of getting visas in the summer these days, for H-2Bs, you need an April 1st start date. The J ones are a little bit different because they follow a school schedule. But I know what we're going into next and the limitations that we're going to have to put on these people. Some of you haven't had to do this yet. But the amount of transgressions that were involved in last year, I'm kind of with Jim's opinion that maybe it takes 1 year off and then they can go back to Jetties.
I mean, it's a privilege to use town property. And I think it was abused. And I'd be, yeah. So.
I guess I have
And
a
it's
question.
nothing, go ahead.
Was there any discussion of scaling the amount of use of the jetties down? When you guys were discussing it, did you say you can use half of the jetties, put a smaller tent, make it culinary, don't put
Right.
wine in, but, no beer tent, no liquor? Was there any of those kind of discussions?
No, I mean, it seemed to be difficult to try to do that. We put kind of what needed to happen as far as transportation and the perimeter security and that sort of thing. And also to make it, in which they addressed each tent having different purposes, to make sure that the attendants with that ticket only go into that tent. They're going to put restrooms by each tent so people don't have to go out and to do that, so that the tickets are very specific, wristbands into that one tent. So that was addressed that way. They would like the culinary, the stage and something has to kind of be separate because they do demonstrations. And the vendor tent was successful. There were a lot of local vendors and things and such that got to be in front of folks in that type of fair type of thing. And it was, so people got to do that during the day. So it seemed that there were good purposes to these. They just had to be very controlled as far as who got in, So, but we can certainly do that. It wasn't discussed though.
Okay.
Yeah.
But as I said, this isn't private property. I remember we had an applicant who wanted to, last year at this event, have a place for people to smoke cigars.
Correct.
And we said no, because we don't do that on town property. And I feel that, I won't talk anymore, but I feel that that really, as I remember that really even more kind of validated my sense this is a privilege that was abused.
My thoughts, to throw them in there. I feel if Amy says that she thinks she feels comfortable with them being able to control it, and we give her the teeth, we really back her if she shuts it down on Friday night. If we're really serious about that, and she says, I think they can do it, here's the measures. If you really think that they're going to listen to you, then
What are the teeth?
Yeah, we
After
asked
you
her. She
sold
said
all those
no.
tickets, you're going to shut it down?
Correct. I think if things such as alcohol leaving the tent and any sort of perimeter security issues, yes, I did, as you see in the communication this year, threaten to pull the permit, but I was gun shy. I felt something was going to happen that I didn't have the authority or the ability to do so, regardless of whether or not we did. So to have that in writing, to have a better contract, to say that if there's any liquor law violations or things of that sort, to me, I think that's serious. You know, if it's leaving, where is it going? Is it going into another restaurant? That could put that restaurant in jeopardy. Someone can get hurt. Things of that sort. Public safety, I think it needs to be something that I can give an immediate warning and say, it's not happening.
So I think the teeth is shutting it down in the middle of the event, and then obviously nothing happens
Right.
any following years, not just the next year, the next 5 years.
Correct.
Or something of that.
Right. They couldn't come back to apply for a permit for public property for those years. Would be something of a deterrent and that sort of thing. We currently, I think the only thing in the regulations would be $300 fines for certain violations of a permit, but nothing that, that
That's
doesn't
no
seem to be a
incentive at all.
deterrent. No.
Like, anybody would be happy to pay that.
Correct that. I do. So that's what I need, the ability to do that, not feel like I'm breaking some rule or law, or we have that agreement up ahead.
And this
Basically,
would,
those
this would be
three.
in the contract? I mean, this
It would be within the conditions and the permit conditions as we stated. Sanctions for a violation, similar to we have liquor license violations. We have those regulations and those sanctions written out, just as we have here, and the grounds for suspension and revoking the permit.
So are you looking more for the kind of the backing and direction from the board
Mm-hmm.
to be able to, for the teeth, or is it more to make sure you have the legal standing to shut it down on Friday night or stop it?
I think the backing from the board is the first as far as what these conditions should be, the issues that we have addressed here tonight. And then legally we'll go through and make sure that the agreement that we draw up is per legal terms. Obviously, I don't think we can do that tonight to make sure,
Right.
but certainly having your backing for that. And that should these transgressions occur again, that we have that ability to do that. And you saw how I addressed it this year. If that were to occur again and I wasn't getting responded to,
What's not, because I'm
So
reading.
we have an application that doesn't say any of the stuff we just said. It doesn't say this stuff. It doesn't
Which part?
say that I now have the authority to go in and shut it down.
I have proposed permit conditions as to far as the grounds for suspending it or revoking it, the different alcohol regulations. So I do have the conditions that I listed and have all the things that we asked them to address as far as perimeter security, transportation, and all those things, signage, all of those requirements that are in there that I brought up this year.
Is this this page?
Correct.
All right. And where's the page? Is it the next following page?
So it is extensive in the sense that it addresses the issues that we had. And Marina researched as far as other towns, as far as what they put to as well. So we didn't pull them out of the air. She did extensive research on that.
So
as
to
well.
me, the teeth is the permit will be suspended.
Correct.
Will be suspended. If any permittee, whatever.
Correct.
Not maybe.
Will be.
Not maybe suspended conditions are revoked. It will be revoked. Or whatever
Correct.
the strong. that's.
Correct.
I don't know what the rest of you think, but
Correct.
given that, I think it's still pretty weak.
For me, I want
ahead.
this to be successful so it continues on.
Correct.
That's really my goal, and whatever parameters that you put in other people. So
Right.
it's not shut down, or that's kind of my
Correct.
thinking.
And I
So
think
it
we
might- it
gave
might
them a
seem-
path to that.
Right. It might
Yeah.
seem punitive right now that
Correct.
we're kind of putting them on trial, but
Right.
if we don't do something, then there'll be no public property or
Right.
whatever down the road.
Right.
Usage.
Correct, and that was the point of this, and we've met several times since the event, is to provide them a path to have this event continue, but also to understand the consequences. Because, when we met last year with them prior to the 2017 year, it had similar discussions about respect for the community and things that we saw as a problem. So we just really need to stand up to that now. But I think this is a path to do so.
Yeah.
And it's something we need to do for the other events as well.
I'm just really struggling with, I mean, they've been doing this for so many years. They should have known the things that had to go into place to make this work. I understand it was bigger and more successful than anticipated.
Yeah.
But just things like signage, you can't leave the premises.
It's hard to believe.
Having somebody at every door. I mean, this is like extreme common sense for any kind of a party that you're having. I'm just really having trouble with it.
And
And
my
I'm very
recollection-
concerned about the location in terms of the fact that it is a huge family venue if it's a nice weekend. And these events go on all day with heavy alcohol consumption.
And Amy, I don't want to misquote you, but my recollections, we talked about this in June. I don't remember that the response from the the people holding it was like I sense some misgiving on your part that their response was appropriate. I'm trying to put a little.
No, correct.
Okay.
I
I just remember things like, well, they said that really wasn't their responsibility, and so-
correct.
am I overstating that?
No,
or? Okay.
no.
So
I was
those
frustrated.
thoughts are echoing.
Absolutely.
As we're considering doing this again another year.
If this were May, I would have said no. I spent all weekend there myself. So this,
Okay.
I was there all weekend. The reason this report is what it is because I stood there with police detail all weekend at Jetties.
Well,
I was there for hours and hours, and it was rainy and cold, and I was miserable. So, in May I would have said no. I am trying to provide people a path to success because this is something, in a sense, that a lot of retailers benefit from. Restaurants, some don't like it, some do. Maybe I'm trying to be less negative in my life. I don't know. But I thought, here is the path to success for you. We can accept it or not. But trust me, they're not the only ones. We had issues with the pops this year. They've been going on for so long, and suddenly it gets loose, and you have teenagers trying to get alcohol. So they aren't the only one. That's why I say that this needs to be brought consistently across the board, and it's something I am addressing across the board. So I don't want to target them as being the bad guys across the board. But yeah, in May, I definitely, in June, no. So I kind of tried to look at this and say, maybe we need to be stronger in our language, and this is it. So that's kind of where I stand right now. I don't know that they will comply. I really don't.
So I
putting that on the
personally
line.
don't think that's the language is strong enough. So just
Yeah.
maybe to get the sense of the board, I will make a motion that we deny the request for the application and ask them to take 1 year off to better come up with plans that will make sure this doesn't happen in the future. That's my motion.
Is there a second for discussion?
I'll second it for discussion. I'm not sure I'll vote for it, but
Do we think that there's anything in between, like something smaller there?
Well, it would have the same problems. It had to address the same issues. Again, we're not canceling the entire event. They could go to a private property. I mean,
Which they've been doing.
yeah,
Well, there's all. I
Bartlett's
mean,
bad? No.
this is only some of the events.
Right,
It's
we're not-
not the whole festival
You
by any
correct.
means.
So
All of these events had been in other venues prior to last year.
That's
They're not
correct.
new to the festival.
nope.
Okay.
Like I said, yeah, yacht club, Children's Beach, where we had issues. So that's why that doesn't happen yet. So
So we've already had issues on 2 town properties
yes, that is correct.
with the same event.
Yes.
What was the other one?
Children's Beach.
Okay.
and that was a year before. It was like, what are we? 16?
ago?
That's why we have a policy of no alcohol in Children's Beach now.
Right.
That's correct.
The motion on the floor is to not approve this. Correct, Jim?
With all those other, take a year off.
Take a year off. Any more discussion?
I'm just wondering whether there's still value, or if we can, perhaps as another meeting, I think Amy still needs the teeth. I think these conditions are a good start. Maybe they could be stronger, but if we're having issues with other events, if above and beyond just however we vote on the Wine and Food Festival, if we can still give her the teeth that she needs, make a motion for that, those types of conditions, regardless of what event it applies to. separate agenda item. Okay.
Yeah, this is a public hearing that we're.
Yeah. No, I just had that question.
And I will say too that yes, I would like stronger teeth, and I am happy to even continue this. We did this early at their request. They are going off to do the Newport Wine and Food Festival and like to start getting their vendors set. You know, if we say, you know what, we're not ready to make this decision yet, we want to do this in October, that is your choice to do so as well. I chose to do this early at their request today. So, you know.
Erica, yeah.
You already closed the public hearing.
Oh, so can't continue.
We're ready to take a vote on the motion?
I'm not sure, like, I'm in between either, I'm leaning toward either, bringing this back up in a month after we see what the teeth are, or tonight trying to figure out what's a in-between step. If I had to vote right now, I think I'd deny it. But if we could see what the teeth were, or we could see what is a scaled down version down there that might be a little more, might be able to be controlled, and then build from there. I think what happened, it sounds like we just jumped to the next level. That's a lot different venue than Children's Beach or the Harbor House even. That's a very large venue. That's could hold, I don't know how many, 500 people, 1,000 people, whatever it did. I mean, that was a big jump.
But tonight was their opportunity to do that, to stand up and say, we're going to do whatever it takes, and we're going to, whatever. And this is the map, and we're going to have people stationed here, here, and here.
Well, but I think they've done that. I think they've agreed to do that. I'm hearing that they're agreeing to do that, though, Jim. So.
Amy, what else could there be, like if we did this in another month, what other teeth or information would there be that we don't already have?
Well, I mean, we can certainly have the actual agreement written out so that you see word for word what we're agreeing to. If we put some monetary teeth in there too as well, I'll speak with legal about that. Just to see.
I don't think we could do that unless it's.
Yeah, I mean, we do
event.
have violation amounts already in the event, but we can certainly have the agreement written out for you to see legally for that. If you would prefer to do that, I'm happy to do that.
I'd feel more comfortable making sure that they're proper. If it goes to legal and there's nothing you can do, there's a $300 fine per day or what, that would be like, what are we doing? So I don't know. I would feel more comfortable if I saw it, voting for it.
Yeah. And we can, yeah, correct.
Does the board want to vote on this motion, change the motion?
Could we, if we denied it, could then it be come back again with new parameters?
Sure.
We would just be denying this particular proposal at this scale.
Might send them a message.
Guess what?
So we just had a little quick sidebar. We can stipulate certain penalties in this agreement that they agree to for certain conditions as well. So similar to the conditions we already put in there too as well. So we can be very specific about that.
How about a motion that we consider this in a month once we see those conditions?
Well, so we have a
We have
motion,
a motion on the floor now.
I understand. I'm giving another motion in case we don't want to.
Well, let's, one motion at a time.
So that we know that there's an option here.
Yeah, well, there's always options. I mean,
Would you consider an amendment to deny it now unless the proposal changes?
no, yeah, absolutely. No, I would deny it tonight, and based on what we just said, what we've heard, and give an opportunity to come back and to give us a real dog and pony show that is, not, I mean, I feel Amy's up there as kind of a de facto advocate, and I think it puts her in a difficult position. So, if this gives them an opportunity to rethink it, maybe take part of it in other locations, I don't know. So,
I would also love for there to be some consideration of whether or not culinary tent can be more culinary, less maybe hard alcohol related. I haven't been, I don't know how the event goes, but to me, culinary tent at Jetties, sandbar, that kind of thing, I think it should be culinary focus and not hard alcohol focus, or not as much of an alcohol focus. So.
The Tito's thing surprised me quite a bit.
Is there
so.
any other board members that agree with Rita on that part? start, just to give direction.
One piece of direction, and we just discussed too, is that if you denied it this evening, we would have to reschedule the public
Right,
hearing, right?
yeah.
Okay.
It'll be another month.
Correct. Okay.
Because it's,
Great.
I mean, I guess the other side of it,
Okay, great.
are there enough people that would vote tonight to approve it? I mean, that's the other option. I could withdraw my motion and you could, I mean, we either have to either deny it, approve it, or take no action, right?
Correct. And I think
Okay,
we
so
can
those are
approve
our
the
options
conditions.
tonight. So right now it's deny it, and and if somebody wants to, we can vote on that, and somebody wants to make a follow-up motion, that's fine.
So it was to deny it with a friendly amendment?
That they could come back with an
Yeah,
alternate
they
proposal.
could always come back, yeah.
Well, just to make it clear in the record.
Okay, so we'll take a vote there. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Opposed? So that passes. So 4-1 to deny.
Who voted against it? You? Oh, okay. So, I mean, after all my rancor, I really hope they take this as an opportunity to go back and rethink it and come back with a proposal that is going to work out for them.
And we'll have something more legal for you to approve as well.
Yeah.
And I think what Rita's talking about, I think is something that should be considered. I think that's, I think that's the direction we
Great.
need to go with this and with more of the things, not, alcohol second, not first.
Yeah.
But
It sounds like a bumper sticker.
And I think, I don't know how much
That's
of
good,
a-
I like it. I like
Jimmy
it.
said that Amy's an advocate for them. I think she's pretty tough on
Yeah.
every
Correct. And
restaurant licensee, for the law.
Ask them.
I wasn't being critical, I'm saying I think she's
Yeah.
in a difficult position.
Right.
No, I was upset last year. I felt we put myself on that line for that. So,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you shouldn't have to spend your weekends there. No, seriously.
No, it's
just-
all good.
It's not right.
Yeah.
To ex-
Thank you.
To explain to the board why I voted against it, I was fine with Amy's recommendation. If she felt comfortable going forward and she had enough teeth, that's why I voted against it. But we'll do this again in a month. It's just the next steps. If they decide to come
decide
back
to,
for another
yeah.
public hearing. Okay. And do you have enough direction? Does everybody have enough direction for what
I do.
we're asking
And this,
for? And
yes, this
if
was
they come
direction
back?
we were heading in anyway. So,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Will we have an opportunity to go back again and look at those things that you're going to apply to other?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
we
good.
have to.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay,
because
thank
it's like I said, we've had other issues. So
Good.
it's
All
a
right.
direction we're definitely heading.
Thank you.
Also, sorry, I wanted to say, Marina and Amy.
Yeah.
It was very comprehensive.
Yeah.
report.
Great
From the High Line to
statistics.
the number
Yes.
of events, number of people, the last.
She's a
couple of years.
lifesaver, Marina.
It really helped us paint the picture and think about it.
Yes.
So well
Thank
done.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to town manager's report.
I don't have anything specific as listed on the agenda, but I thought that I would update you a bit about some upcoming agenda and other items. At your meeting next week, we have our legislators attending your meeting, Senator Sear and Representative Fernandez. And among, if there are other things the board wishes to discuss, that's fine. But right now, what we've got on there is the Airbnb bill, which has not passed. But they're going to give an update about it. And as I think you know, Rita and I are attending a Cape Cod Selectmen's Association meeting this Friday in Eastham about this bill. The housing bill, an update about that. Any upcoming general law changes that we might want to be interested in, marijuana law, plastics, anything like that. We're hoping to get an update on the letter we discussed back in January from the Department of Public Health regarding our island home, which we have not received. And you've got some utility petitions on next week's meeting. The 26th, you have a county meeting and a bunch of real estate items. Your October 3rd meeting, I think you all know by now, is being rescheduled to Tuesday, October 2nd, so that the board members may attend the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing regarding Surfside Commons, which is scheduled for crossing. Sorry, I can't. Crossing. And that hearing is scheduled for Wednesday, October 3rd at 4:30 at the high school auditorium. In other General activities, we are working on a pretty strong outreach plan for the special town meetings. The Capital Program Committee capital project review process for fiscal '20 is well underway. We are working on a community benefit agreement with a wind energy group for an offshore wind farm. I think Rita may have attended a meeting today about it, as well as town council, and that will be coming before the board sometime this fall. I mentioned the Selectmen's Association meeting. We've got some projects going on that I think board members, you have been interviewed with and involved with, including the staffing study, an operational review of the Plus Department, and we are about to, well, I think you met yesterday with the Novak group about the strategic planning process. The first meeting for the Senior Center Advisory Committee, or whatever I've called it, I forget, is next Thursday, the 20th at 4. And our group, we have a staff group that is working on the Our Island Home issue of what will it take to build new or renovate the facility at the current site. We've engaged a consulting firm, and we are meeting with them in the next couple of weeks. So those are just some of the things that might be of interest to you.
Thank you, Libby. I'm going to ask we just do a 2-minute break before we start into the next hearings for the liquor license violations.
What's that?
I know Robert's bad. Telling me that it's parallel to but the motion to postpone.
7 out of 9 of these are customers of mine. And I haven't done this disclosure. 7 out of 9 of these violations. I haven't done this. Well, yeah, I know. I don't know. I don't think they need it. I think they're going to probably follow. My guess is they're going to follow the recommendations. It is funny. I'm surprised more restaurants and.
The tipping price for the past week and a half, 2 weeks, I've been accosted at like parties range of literally one part of this liquor license on postal records where I was septic, moratoriums, overthrowing the entire government, teachers' wages, like all oh, well, we should either raise them, or fire everyone and get people. It's just like so it was just funny because I felt that everyone was pretty clueless, but not everyone. But it was just Saturday night, everyone in it, and then went to a couple other just everywhere I go. Literally in my wetsuit and bare feet this morning, I was getting a talk or somebody from one and someone comes up to me and says, I can't, but I felt bad because I've been having to do the stop and shop with like don't make eye contact, and it's funny because I didn't even say it to them, but I saw her, and I was like, and not stopping, I'm gonna stop.
Okay, we're going to get started here in a second.
I'm going to recuse myself. 7 out of 9. I haven't done a disclosure. 7 out of 9 are customers, and a couple of them I haven't. So I haven't done that yet. I don't think it matters if I do it or not because I think I know what's going to happen. But I read them, and yeah. I'm 40 pounds overweight. I'm fine.
Oh boy.
We needed that break, Jim.
I know. It's gonna be a long meeting. We didn't need to talk about that for that long. But since I did most of the talking, and I'm giving myself all that feedback. No, but we talked about it, but we kept repeating ourselves, including me. So I was just, so. I have a concern about them being on public property. So.
Okay, we're going to get started on the first of the Select Board's reports and comments. This is a hearing, not a public hearing. This is a hearing regarding sanctions against the following establishments resulting from liquor license violations. What we're going to do, Amy's going to stand up and kind of just do this one time instead of every single time like we've done in the past.
Right. Yeah, I can do that as we get into it. So we can go do the swearing in first and
Okay.
yeah.
So we have 1, 2, 3. We have 9 licenses under review tonight. And so if anybody is going to speak tonight, whether it's a licensee or a representative, can everybody please stand up? And we have to swear you in, and you say, "I will." Even if if you choose not to speak later, you don't have to. But if you think you might, do you swear that your testimony tonight is truthful? Say I do. Okay, that's it. You're all sweared in. It's not a criminal hearing, but it's process. Now Amy goes through her process.
Correct. So what we're going to do is each individual license, I will just review the details from the police report, the incident, date it occurred, the facts, findings, and aggravating circumstances, mitigating circumstances, and such, and refer to the regulations for the town of Nantucket as far as sanctions and what our recommendation is. At that point, the licensee, their representatives have a chance to discuss with you the incident, any sort of mitigating factors they would like you to consider in the sanctions, and at that point, then the discussion for what sanctions are going to be applied, if any, or of a warning for each license. Okay?
Yep.
All right, so we'll start with, what is our first one?
Well, I just want to add in there for the board. We're going to go through each one at a time. It is not a public hearing, so no one from the public can speak
Correct.
on this. Just the licensee and town officials. Once we've heard from both, one of us will make a motion to close the review of the evidence, and then we will make a motion of the finding of the fact, like this is a violation.
Correct.
Yes, we understand
Correct.
it. And then there's a third motion for the action. So there's 3 motions for every single one
Correct.
of these.
Correct.
Okay, just
Great.
want to let our board know how it's going to work.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This first reading of the facts, I'm going to read into the record so we don't have to say it every time. The first fact being that the Town of Nantucket Rules and Regulations, Chapter 250, Section 7, provides that the Nantucket Police Department shall have the authority to investigate potential violations of the regulations and to conduct other such enforcement as the Chief of Police deems appropriate, including the use of plainclothes police officers for the purpose of ensuring compliance with Chapter 138, the regulations, and other state and local laws as may be applicable. Each investigation went per the ABCC guidelines as far as how they were conducted, how underage operatives are conducted. They are tested prior to each outing as far as an alcohol test, blood alcohol test before and after. They're photographed per regulations as far as what they look like at the time, those types of compliance things. They cannot lie at any chance. If someone says, "Are you 21?" and they say no, or they say yes, I'm sorry, and that's a lie. They cannot do that. They cannot provide false identification either as well. So they are unable to do that. They need to be asked for identification when they enter into it. There's a detective here tonight, so if you have questions as we go through this, the detective that ran this operation is here if you have questions as far as that. I will go through and just kind of highlight each one. We are starting with Epernay. Is a package store license, an off-premise license, all alcoholic beverages. As for the police report, on July the 24th, 2 operatives were into the package store, under 21, both age 20. They were able to purchase alcoholic beverages. That server was trained, again, tips trained. We require that within 30 days of employment that all employees are trained with a Massachusetts certified program and tips training, because that is also another violation. This person was trained. We also look at the history of the license, provide you anything that has happened within the past 5 years, similar to what the ABCC considers how long they've been in business and number of violations. In this case, in the 5-year history of this license, they have not had any violations. The person was trained. We had the discussion. They are a very good license. They've kind of worked with us on this. We would only require a written warning in this case per the regulations and no history of violations in this case.
there's any questions, if there's no questions for Amy, the licensee
The licensee.
can speak if they like. Don't have to. Okay.
Ready for a motion?
Motion to close.
To
the
close
review.
close the review? I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second motion,
Which is,
kind of is the
so
Find a violation.
what?
I move to find.
I move to find the violations.
do we need to say chapter 160? We need to,
Can you say as outlined in the
Yes.
report?
Yeah, as set forth.
I move to find the violations as set forth.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Now the third motion.
Make a motion that we take the recommendations and issue a written warning to the company or server.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Okay. And next is we are on Mid on Main. Okay. The next licensee is Med on Main, which holds an all alcoholic beverages seasonal liquor license, on-premise license. On July 25th, the evening of July 25th, two underage operatives went into Med on Main and were served alcoholic beverages. We have found that in the past 5 years, they have not had any violations. In this case, they were not asked for an identification, purchased the alcohol, and left. We have recommended, again, this has not had a history of a violation, a written warning for the violation. We did put in here further, as we do these investigations, find other issues with the license, and I have discussed this with their attorney too as well, is that we felt that the manager was out of date and their current manager was in Boston and not current, so that if they were to continue, they would need to change the manager. So it's just a condition that they need to recognize, and we had that discussion, so all good.
Good evening. For the record, Brian Swain, attorney for Med on Main. And my client wanted me to first and foremost let the board know that he understands that there need to be repercussions for licensees who have violations. And he appreciates the staff's recommendation of a written warning. However, he wanted me to bring some certain circumstances to the board's attention. My client has several licenses on the mainland, and he's currently involved in transferring one of his licenses in Boston to a third party. He's going to be surrendering his license here as of Columbus Day, so just a few weeks away. He won't be operating on Main Street. Issuing a written warning tonight may have hazardous potential in his application that's currently pending with the state. The fact that he's never been in trouble, he's never been sanctioned, he's been cooperative, and he's surrendering his liquor license in just a few weeks, we would ask that the board not impose any sanctions. Thank you.
This is some information that we've kind of just discussed today. We feel that this is a violation that occurred. It is our regulations, and a warning is appropriate. I don't think there's a circumstance where you can say, well, we're giving up our license, so we don't need to have this recorded. So from our perspective, it occurred, it is part of the process, and should still be submitted. I don't think
Can we
it's-
ask questions now? Or?
Go ahead.
I have a question of the detective, and this really applies to, is there a reason you have two people go? I assume it says two people. These weren't two different purchases. It was two people came for one purchase?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board,
Yeah.
my name is Chris Kelly. I'm a detective with the Nantucket Police Department. We basically use two people just so that for safety, so that they can watch each other.
Oh, okay.
We have gone with one person, but it's just kind of the practice that we
Okay.
used to. There's no they go in together.
Yep.
So there's no two purchases.
Okay.
But that's kind of just been our practice.
And they're both underage.
Correct.
So it's kind of a, okay, good. thank you. I think makes sense. Appreciate it. And then for Amy, the tips, yes or no, does this mean that the server was not tip certified?
Not in this one. I think
What do you mean?
eventually that they were, but
I'm sorry, what did you say? It says no for Med on Main. Tips, yes, no?
was
No?
that in the initial?
Says-
Because sometimes we
yep.
don't get it right away.
It says 7/25/2018, no.
Oh, at the initial thing that I sent in?
It says August liquor license compliance checks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So whatever I submitted was whatever I didn't get at the time. Sometimes we don't get it right away.
So what does that mean? At the time of their being served, did the
Meaning-
person have a tips license?
Meaning we don't have proof of it at the time. So I'm supposed to notify you immediately within 2 weeks, I think it is, whatever it is, when these things happen. But we do an
Okay.
investigation afterwards. I mean, they really should have it on site immediately. That is part of the regulation. But at that time, I didn't have it in front of me.
Okay.
Right, when I submitted the initial notification to the board that these things had occurred. But investigation goes on afterwards.
Are you asking, but do we know if they had tips training or not?
If they didn't, eventually I would have put that in the recommendation. But when this was sent, it was the initial, they didn't have it on site when the detective showed
So they
up.
didn't have training.
They did, but they didn't have proof of it.
They didn't have documentation
Correct.
of it. Okay.
Correct.
Is that true for all of the no's?
No,
Okay.
no, but sometimes that
tell us.
happens.
But you'll tell us.
Correct, it would be
as
in
we
the
go.
recommendation.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Sorry, Amy, I had one more question about the issue with the manager. Has that been resolved?
Well, they're just, giving up their license, so.
Yeah. My client informed me recently that he's going to shut down. We had talked to Amy about filing a change of manager application. However, with the circumstances that he's closing, we had discussions that
Right.
this is sufficient and there's no need to change the manager. It
Right.
would take longer to do that than it would to
Yeah.
close down.
Okay. Correct.
Okay. If there's no more questions, is there a motion to?
Make a motion that we find the facts, close the review
Review
with the
the-
finding as outlined.
One at a time. You have to close the
Okay.
review.
Second.
No, with the
those in
facts, the fact. Oh, right. Yes. Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so now we have to make a motion to,
Make a motion that we find the facts as stipulated or outlined.
Violation.
Find the violation is. I'm not going to try again. I'll let one of you do it.
Find the violations as set forth in the report.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then the third motion
Remind us one more time.
Make a motion to issue a written warning.
for the violation, whether we
Okay.
agreed or
Yeah.
not for that. And
So-
we can also deliberate on this
Can we?
or ask
Yeah.
questions.
Can we talk about it for a minute?
Yeah,
I mean,
we
can we?
can, right?
I'll second that. Then we can discuss the motion.
Okay,
Right.
so-
I'll second it. But I'd like to discuss it before we
Okay.
go to a vote. And I just, to me, there's a mitigating circumstance if this really is no longer a going concern, and that the business has said they're going to cease business soon. I don't know what the date is. Maybe we could find out the date they're closing.
Columbus Day. this
Okay,
year.
so it's a month away. I understand that. I'm just saying that to me, that's a mitigating circumstance.
As far as not issuing a warning or issuing a warning?
Or issuing it after, Columbus. I don't know. I just, to me, it's a.
So we had this discussion. I found out about this recently. It wasn't public information, so I was kind of going back and forth as to how this would be handled. We discussed it, and really, as far as operations and precedent, this violation occurred. This is our process. I think it should go through.
Okay.
What if someone comes up and made the point to me that they say, "Oh, we're giving up our license," but then they don't? We have to redo the hearing.
All right.
We just wanted to go through the process as required. And then, should they give up the license, great. If it were transferred, if they ended up transferring the license to someone else, this sanction would stay. It stays with the license. If they surrender it and then someone goes for a new license, it wouldn't apply to the new license holder. So there's different things that might happen. And I don't know. They're telling me this is happening, but I don't have it in hand
Okay.
yet. So I think that's what the decision was.
It's good to hear. Thank you.
So there's a motion to accept the recommendation for a written warning. All right, you second it for discussion? Is that correct? Mm-hmm. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. 4-0. Okay, we're on to 167 Raw.
Right, okay. So now we are discussing 167 Raw. I think I'm just going to read the charges. That might be a better way to discuss this. This one is going to be a little bit more complicated, and I will expand on it. The charges in this case include 2 counts of MGL 138, which is sale and delivery of the alcoholic beverage to a person under 21 of age, which includes 2 counts, also a violation of our regulations. We also have a count of a violation of employment of persons under 18 years of age, and 1 count of the not having tips training, meaning employees must be certified within 30 days of employment on licensed premises. In this case, we have 2 dates where there were violations. First being on July the 26th, when 2 operatives did enter the premises and were able to purchase an alcoholic beverages. It's a package store license, and leave the premises with that alcoholic beverages. The second violation occurred later on August the 8th, and this is where we're going to have some discussion as far as what happened here. There was a sale to the underage operatives of some alcohol where the discussion is coming in, and we provided video, I believe, with the packet as well that was provided by 167 Raw, where the discussion was that they were asked, the operatives were asked, do you have ID? And I can have the detective discuss this too as well. They said it was in the car. Can we pay cash? 167 Raw is saying that they were asked if they were 21, and they said yes, which would be, like I said, a false answer that they cannot give. So there's discussion back and forth. We were unable to hear very well on the video to see if that did occur. Our folks say no, that they did not answer that. So we do agree that there is possibly a discussion there that, we agree it's unclear. However, in that instance in the investigation, the video shows the employee selling that alcohol was 17 years old. Which is a violation of state law, that we can't overlook. That is,
You have to be 18.
you have to be 18 or older. That is state law. So that violation is the part that we are really addressing. We'll agree that there was some discussion. So that means there are 2 violations within a couple of weeks of each other. This is a new license. And we cannot overlook that part of it. It was chosen, the detectives decided they were not charging the 17-year-old. She was put in a bad position. She didn't lie about her age, provide false ID to her employer, so she was not charged in court for that.
She did not?
No,
Okay.
so she wasn't, it was felt she was put in a bad position.
I mean, okay, but
Correct.
Her employer knew that she wasn't.
Yes.
Or should have known, okay.
Correct. So, and we've discussed that with him. He understands that now. That was, she can certainly work behind the fish counter and, sell fish and things of that sort. She should not be at the point of sale or deal with any sort of alcohol service at all at that age. So that's what the recommendation is addressing, the fact that there were multiple violations in the span of those 2 weeks. We did say that she was not trained, obviously 17 years old being a state violation, 2 violations in 2 weeks, and failure to request the ID in the first instance. Per the Blue Book guidelines, we did a 3 to 4 day suspension. We recommended 3 days to be served. And again, when we recommend a suspension, we recommend it be on the same date that the violation occurred in the following year. They violated on August 8th this year. We request that the violations start to be served on August 8th of next year. One other thing, in this case, should the suspension go forward, they would have to remove the alcohol from the premises. It needs to be in locked storage. It cannot be accessible at all. So in this instance, they could still be operational with selling food as long as alcohol is removed completely. So in that instance, that would happen there.
And it's a small display. I mean,
Correct.
It's not a big part of their
Correct.
square footage.
It wouldn't be required that he shut down his food service.
No, I
He
understand
would just
that.
have to remove it completely, the alcohol.
Licensee?
Good evening. James Merberg. I'm an attorney. I appear for 167. This is Mr. Sendoli, who's the license holder and operator. I'd point out respectfully that with regard to the issue of the young lady who's 17, this was merely an oversight. She just simply wasn't checked to see if she was 18. She appeared to be 18. I understand that's not a basis necessarily for finding my client not responsible, but it's certainly something that the board can take into account. A very pleasant young lady. We have the videos. Detective Kelly is here. I spoke with him. I know my client did on several occasions. The reason he has videos that oversee the cameras, cameras that oversee the point of sale, is to make sure that people come in and are properly asked questions about their age and that the transactions are appropriate. With regard to this 17-year-old young lady, based on our investigation and the video, it's clear that she's asked, clear that she asks, how old are you? And then when the person says they have ID, you can hear very clearly on the tape that I don't think there's any dispute that she says, they say, well, go out to the car and get the ID. So this is not someone who is attempting to circumvent the alcohol requirements for purchase of alcohol. We also provided a second video for another young lady. If you look at the video, and I'm not suggesting it's a factor, but it's certainly something to be considered in mitigation. The people came in nicely dressed. It's in the middle of the day. They appeared to be some kind of a social couple, the way they were dressed. They come in, they make a very small purchase of alcohol. And again, they certainly didn't look as if they were underage. The woman who created that sale is a well-trained person, has been on the job for many years. She simply relied on her experience that they appeared to be old enough on a very busy day in August and permitted them to take the alcohol without checking their IDs. They certainly wasn't done to circumvent the law. It certainly wasn't done for the purpose of trying to generate sales by selling to people who are underage. I'd respectfully point out my client is a second-generation operator of this small business on Nantucket. His license and the privilege to sell alcohol was given to him last year. He did not have any difficulties at all last year. These two events did come close in time, but as I say, the videos, if the board has the opportunity to look at them, will make it clear that this was not an attempt to circumvent the alcohol regulations, but rather simply a mistake on the part of the older tip-trained seller who did not check because they appeared to be of sufficient age. With regard to the 17-year-old, as I say, I don't think Detective Kelly would disagree. She very clearly asks, are you 21? And they'll go out to their car and get the ID, and she lets them walk away, which is what happened. It's all on the videotape. So I'd say respectfully, I don't know how the board wants to treat this. My client is a businessman here. He's trying very hard to comply with the rules and regulations. If a suspension is appropriate, I'd ask that if you impose it, that you suspend its actual service and give my client 1 year to prove that he can comply with his conditions. He was able to do it the first year. He certainly has attempted to do it the second year. And if there's a sanction imposed, I believe the board has the authority to suspend the imposition of it for a period of a year so that my client can demonstrate that he has the ability to control his employees, to continue to videotape their actions, and certainly to comply with the regulations promulgated by the state and enforced by the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
Just to add real quick. Just in the case of the 17-year-old, I'd just like to point out that I personally have historically been the one to run payroll for years. With the business just getting busier, I've had to move away from that. I had a manager doing that. When you onboard someone on payroll, you see their age, you know how old they are. Had I been doing that, I would have known that she was 17. This was a mishap in communication between the two of us. We have new measures in place to make sure that'll never happen again, and I take full responsibility for not knowing that she wasn't 18. She's a talented young lady. She's an accomplished musician, has a personality of a 40-year-old, and just an oversight.
I'm not sure that's good or bad to have that personality. But
Thank you for clarifying that.
I'd also like to add that we've taken our policy from under 40 carding to everyone gets ID'd. So we've had some elderly ladies. I don't know if they're offended or excited that we asked them for an ID, but we're asking everyone for an ID at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the clarification on the payroll thing because that was, I was kind of thinking, how did you not know if you fill out the paperwork? But.
So we now have an email system when anyone's onboarded onto the system that email is automatically sent out that every one of our managers knows the age of that employee along with anyone else who comes on, whether it's in May or in the middle of the summer. So there's no lapse in communication there.
Any other testimony from either?
I have Yeah, I have a question for Amy.
About the evidence?
Yes,
Okay.
about the evidence. I am a little bit concerned about the sort of misrepresentation or the lying. So when it says that there are 2 violations in 2 weeks,
Correct.
are we dropping, or is that referring to the 2 sales, or has that been
No.
changed? It's the age and the sale.
Yeah, and we appreciate hearing, steps are taking to make sure that doesn't happen again. Absolutely, and that's why they have that opportunity to do that as well. We agreed that, and Detective Kelly can certainly address this, but that it was uncertain. I couldn't really tell from that video or hearing. We have some different stories, so I kind of put that aside and said had it been just the 1 violation, it would have been a warning. This came on, and we can see how there was a little bit of you couldn't hear that could have been said. So once we found out, though, that the girl was 17, that's a state law violation, so I did base it on that. Also wasn't trained. Maybe if she'd been TIPS trained, she would have seen that she can't serve. Being her age, she might have been aware of that too as well. So we couldn't ignore that part. So I based it on that. The 3 days, for each violation. The first service, the fact that it was 2 violations within a couple of weeks. I basically based it on the being under 18 and serving alcohol, and admitted that there was some confusion as to what was said in that second sale, but we couldn't overlook the underage service.
If I may add, I'd just like to say that while the video took place, it was a very busy day. There was some commotion in the store, so it is a little bit difficult to hear. However, if you plug it into speakers, and I watched it many times, obviously it's of high concern to me, you can absolutely hear the underage policeman ask, Maggie ask them, "Are you 21?" They say yes, without a doubt.
And they say they're going out to the car to get the identification. That is very clear on the tape.
Any other questions on the evidence portion? If not, we can.
I just did.
Sorry?
Maybe we discussed it, but detective, do you? What's your position or on that last statement?
Well, I don't. He brought that up immediately afterwards. He came out and then he sent me the video when I asked him to. If you watch the video, it's at that exact second that something pops up in the thing, and it's kind of hard to hear. But I definitely don't dispute that she may have asked that.
Okay. That she may have answered that way.
Yes,
That she was 21. Okay.
If you watch it, she says, "Are you paying with cash?" And then something happens in the video, and she very well could have said, "Wait, are you guys 21?"
Mm-hmm.
And then he answered yes immediately after that.
And then one of the 2 individuals that were brought in undercover say, "We'll go out to the car and get our ID." They wouldn't have been saying that.
Well, she asked again, "If you're 21, I need to see your ID," and you said it's in the car because they had already said it was in the car. She asked, "If it's in the car, will you go get it?" And at that point, they just took the beer off the counter and went out to the car.
But either way, the recommendation's only for 2 violations.
We understand that. My thought
Not
would be
3.
that, as the detective said, we are fully cooperative. When it was brought to my client's attention, he immediately proffered the videotapes. They were sent to Detective Kelly to explain what the circumstances were, which can't be really questioned, I have to say respectfully, because you can't open a videotape and change it, and the sequence is there.
The only thing I'd say is that they had paid for it when they walked out. They didn't steal it.
That's correct.
Any other questions from the board? Evidence?
I suppose one more question for Amy in terms of, so if there had just been the 1 violation, the initial violation
Correct.
with the of age and the tip certification, it would have been a written warning.
It would have been a written warning. And then in this case, what happened was, and again, we did admit that possibly did occur, what they're saying in the video that we can't hear. It's an underage person was put in a position where she shouldn't be making that decision. That's state law. She wasn't tips trained. Again, that's something that could have caught that. So that was just a bad position, and I can't, as a precedent, set that. Oh, that's fine. She's a good kid. That's great. It's a state law violation whether a license is issued under. So I really did make the violation based on that.
And
Not-
if that had been the only violation,
If she
your
was 18,
recommendation-
we could have probably gone to a written warning or a 1 day on the 2 violations. But the extra violations I did were based on the underage person serving alcohol.
I'd just say respectfully to the board, in light of these facts, those are factors we think are in mitigation. My client is trying to make a very concerted effort to comply with the law. As I said, he made it through the first year and didn't realize until Detective Kelly brought this to his attention that there were violations in the second year. So even if you decide to impose a violation, I'd ask that you suspend the application of it for 1 year to give my client the opportunity to demonstrate he can comply with the rules, which I believe you have within the discretionary powers. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to end the review on the evidence?
Motion to end the review on evidence.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, is there a motion to, this one might be different, to find the violation that's set forth in the report?
So what page, I'm still looking, what page in our packet is
Find
that
that there were the 2
recommendation?
violations.
This isn't correct because I take some things out.
Oh, okay.
So it's page 79? No,
No, she said
94.
thank you.
So the recommendation is we need to accept the violation first.
To accept that the violations occurred because it's not actually saying 3 violations, it's saying 2.
2 violations,
Right.
2 weeks.
So it would be to find the violations as set forth in the report.
And to make it
Yes.
clear, the 3rd violation has essentially been dropped.
that there's a dispute on it, correct?
Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we suspend the license for 2 days to be served
Oh, wait,
August
We
8th
haven't
and
We haven't
9th.
done the
Oh.
second one
Second
yet.
part yet. So I'll make a motion to find the violation set forth in the report.
Sorry, we didn't vote.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now you can,
I would make a motion to suspend the license for 2 days next summer on the 8th and the 9th to serve alcohol.
is there a second for discussion?
Second for discussion.
Amy, I have a question. What is the actual term when you say like, okay, you did this wrong, we're gonna give you a year off, and if you have 1 violation, then it happens again?
As far as holding days in abeyance?
Abeyance.
Correct. That would be the term, and as you saw what I submitted with the ABCC, they do that a lot. But it would be, you hold 1 day in abeyance. If any further violations occur in that time period, they have to serve that day.
Is that part of your
So-
motion? or no?
Oh, to hold the 3rd day in abeyance? Actually, I'm going to change my motion since no one seconded it yet. Why don't we do a 1-day suspension this coming summer and hold 2 days in abeyance?
Second.
Any discussion on that?
So I'm just trying to understand how do we, this, because I say this every year, but is it just, I'd just be interested in why you were thinking that versus the 2 and 1 or 1 and 2 or.
I just felt like these happened all right on top of each other, and I was in there buying fish late in August, and I saw that they are already carding every single person who goes in there. So I know they've taken the steps. I just I think that it can't just be a written warning because there were multiple violations, but it doesn't need to be as high as 3
Well, that's
days to be
helpful.
served next summer. And I was trying to actually keep it off of a Saturday.
So is the day going to be August 8th?
It would be the 8th. And 2 days held in abeyance that would then be served if there was a violation next summer.
And we just need to be very specific. We've had this in the past where we haven't been specific enough as far as the time period of those days being held in abeyance for 1 year, beginning on date and ending on those days expire on. We're going to have this coming up in a couple of these hearings, August 8th,
Oh, okay.
2020. You know what I mean? I need
Okay.
to be very specific as to how I write it. That 2 days will be held in abeyance until, should no further violations occur until, say, August 8th, 2020. If you want to hold them for a year, saying that if they get through
Why don't we say August 10th?
2020.
So is that, I'll change your motion to that, or,
And I'll add that.
yeah, okay.
Sorry, can you say so for the year beginning, or what was it?
Immediately, so that they will serve a 1 day suspension to be served on August 8th,
Yep.
2019. 2 day suspension will be held in abeyance should there be no further violations until August the 10th, 2020. Should they not have any violations till those days expire?
2020. 2
Uh,
years.
19. No. Yeah, 2020.
2020.
Yeah, it's 2020.
2020, yeah. So then how, do we need to prescribe how they would be served if there is a violation?
They would be similar to what we do now is whenever that violation occurs, say next year on July 3rd.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
All right.
We'll do
So
it for the following, yeah.
Okay, that's all I want to know. All right.
Can I repeat it back,
Yes.
please? Okay, motion to suspend the license for 1 day to be served on August 8th, 2019, and to hold 2 days suspension in abeyance until August 10th, 2020.
Correct.
That's the motion. There
Rita
was a
seconded.
Second.
second. Any other discussion?
No, I think it's great that they initiated. It may be overkill, but if they're willing to do it, I think to me, that's somebody recognizing their problem and taking action over and above right away. And I'm impressed by it.
I'd agree with you, Jim. I think this is fair. We're going to add into the abeyance. And Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but when your recommendations, when you do a 3-day suspension, you kind of go on the more
Correct.
further end.
Correct.
And we can decide within that.
Yes, like we discussed, I've given room for them to come up and discuss the mitigating circumstances and the steps they've taken to improve their process. Absolutely. It gives them an opportunity to do so.
Right. So
Yes.
you don't suggest a suspension on the lower end and we go
No,
further. It's the other
there's
way.
nothing here that I would say deserves harsher sanctions at all. I
what
go
the
by
board-
the blue book specifically, number of violations per the recommendation, absolutely. So that gives you room to have this discussion.
Just want the board to understand what you're thinking on that.
Yep.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Chanticleer.
Chanticleer? Okay, so we have Chanticleer.
I just do need to disclose that I've made a blanket disclosure on restaurants that we do laundry business with, and the Chanticleer is one of them.
So we have
I don't think it
Chanticleer, and the
affects-
charge here is just the 1 count of sale or delivery to a person under 21 years of age. This occurred on July the 26th, when we had 2 operatives enter the restaurant and purchased an alcoholic beverage. We had age 19 that ordered that. They have no history of violations in 5 years, and have been in business obviously for a very long time. We've not had any violations. In this case, we would recommend a written warning, and we've certainly discussed that and don't feel there anything else further needs to be done other than the warning.
Thank you, and I would just say that we do take it very seriously, and it was an interesting experience to see the staff respond to something kind of so serious happening to the restaurant. So they have certainly become hyper aware to the point of angering quite a few of our customers. I have to say, I spend my nights now going from table to table, explaining why we are carding people and carding people's children, and they're 35 years old. They don't carry their IDs anymore, and I just have to say, I'm really sorry, because this is the way it is. This is the law. So we need you to help us by bringing we're trying to educate our clientele as well, that these are the tools we need to stay in compliance and to be consistent between tables. I can't let one table, because I know them, not have an ID when the people sitting right next to them, I don't know, and I ask for IDs. So it's a touchy thing in a fine dining restaurant, and when you have a regular clientele, but we're trying to find our path in it, and we're trying to be very diligent. So thank you very much for just the warning, and we'll do better.
Thank you. We'll, if there's any questions, close the.
Motion to close the review.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to find the violations as set forth in the report.
All right, I've got that.
Wrote it down.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And a motion to accept the recommendation of a written warning.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Now to Sushi by Yoshi.
And I should add it as, well, go ahead.
At the end of this, could we, I have a couple process questions
Sure.
about these that we can ask the detective at the end, not
Yeah,
related
absolutely.
to individual. But
Sure.
Okay, all right,
Yep.
thank you.
And I wouldn't add, like Susan mentioned, most of these, almost all, took it very seriously. I didn't mention that too as well, but I discussed it with most of them in person, and that certainly was the case. So I didn't come across any that did not. We are talking about Sushi by Yoshi. So, let me pull to this one. Sorry. Oh, why don't I have that one? Okay, I'm gonna have to read it off of here. So the charges we have here are one count of the sale of delivery to an person under 21 for both the regulations and a non-tips trained employee. There's two other counts here that are going to be different than we've had before. We have one count of a violation of the license type being an on-premises location, and one count of violation of the terms and conditions of the license. In this violation, what occurred, and again, we had a long discussion about this, but what occurred was the alcohol was served at the takeout counter. If you go in Sushi by Yoshi, they have the restaurant here to the right and the takeout counter in a separate section to the left. On the license itself is a condition that the select board determined when the license was issued a few years ago, that no service from the takeout counter. They could not serve alcohol from the takeout location. So that explains that violation. It was sold from that location. They also, the underage operatives, left the building with the alcohol, and we took it back into evidence. It's an on-premise license. Alcohol should not be leaving the premises. It's not a package store. So that explains that violation as well, and led to the higher count for closure. Again, Terry and I had a long discussion about it. Obviously, he understands kind of what happened, but that's where that comes from in those violations.
Hey, yeah, that's all pretty accurate. You know, my daughter was visiting from college, and she got a chance to work the takeout window, and she probably will never do it again. And we're a lot more enforcive in the dining room as far as tips go, and checking IDs. Takeout window is usually a quick sale, and it got through, and it did leave the building. And I was the manager, tips manager on duty, and I didn't witness it. It happened behind, in a quick situation. That's pretty accurate. I work with Amy to make sure that I pay a closer eye to this kind of stuff. But my daughter's devastated. She's coming back for a court date, and unfortunately, like Susan Handy was saying, it's gotten to the point where people. Yoshi's was BYOB for so long that a big focus was just getting them to stop bringing it in, so we could control it in our dining room. But it's quite offensive to people when you're constantly asking them to produce an ID. They think most people think they can go around Nantucket, with just a heavy metal Amex card, and that's all they need. You understand what I mean, Jason?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
Okay.
And they've had no other, I want to just mention too, no history of violations, or again, they did add the on-premise service recently, but we've had no history with them prior to this. So the recommendation, the 4-day suspension next summer, is just based on the fact that it was the service, the no training, and then the 2 violations of the actual license, state and local conditions that comes from.
So, did the individual that didn't have tips training, how long did it take them to get tips training?
Well, like we said, it was a temporary situation.
Yeah,
His daughter,
My daughter
so,
visited
yeah.
from New York City
Okay.
for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And I am tip certified, and I was at the wheel.
So there's no point in her getting it then?
No.
Right, okay.
She'll never go in the water again.
I feel bad for her, so. Oh, okay.
Okay, I think that's the evidence. Make a motion to close the review on evidence.
Motion to close the review.
All those in favor? Oh, sorry,
Aye.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, the next motion?
Motion to accept the violation as set forth in the report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Now for the recommendations of 4-day suspension. Now,
So
another question, they can technically be open. They don't have to change the whole restaurant.
Correct.
Move everything out.
It's another situation that they can probably easily remove the alcohol from the premises, and still serve sushi. Correct.
Well,
They had that operation for years.
It seemed like there was one violation, which was, this person was
Underage
sold
serving.
by a temporary person.
Correct.
That was something they shouldn't have been sold.
Correct.
The other violations happened as a consequence of that.
Correct.
It wasn't like, oh, well, so I to me, that's less, it's, I personally put less emphasis on that. I'm just making a comment, so.
Okay.
So I think that's 4 days is a heavy, so I'd go for, I'll make a motion. Well, anybody else want to discuss it?
We can deliberate if you want.
I was going to make a motion, but you can.
I'll make a motion they get a 1-day suspension with 2 in abeyance.
I'd second.
Can we make that day the 29th of July?
You can make it any day you want.
I'm trying to keep people off the weekend.
Yeah, that's good.
So
Yeah,
it's not as punitive.
So the motion is to have the.
So
suspension
on
the 29th.
29th of July, 2019, with 2 days held in abeyance, to be held in abeyance until August 1st, 2020, and whatever the language needs to be beyond that. That's my motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 4-0. Thank you. Jerry? Nantucket Trading Post next.
For some reason, it's not on my thing. Okay. Now we are at Nantucket Trading Post, which is a package store license, an off-premise license, wine and malt beverages. There's a count of the delivery of alcohol to a person under 21. There's also a count for no tips staff training on this. We scrolled on I don't have this one. This occurred on August the 7th, where the operatives were able to purchase a 12-pack of beer and leave the premises. On this case, this is a multiple violation. We go next day. In the past few years, the prior charge of sale of person under 21 years of age was in 2016. They were given a written warning. Therefore, this is based on a 2-day suspension of the liquor license based on the underage service, the no staff training, and the second violation in 3 years. Blue Book guidelines is 1 to 2 day suspension for such a violation.
Amy,
Is there,
can I
is
ask a
the
question?
applicant or the,
I was just going to ask if you know, for the 2016 violation, were they tips trained or no?
If it was a written warning, then yes.
They were tips trained.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Would you like to speak?
Take whatever's fair.
do you dispute the facts? No. You agree with what was
Yeah,
stipulated?
she made
Okay.
a mistake.
Okay.
She said she had up a day and
Okay.
she always check like this, but
Okay.
she didn't that time.
And have you changed any of your internal processes as a result of this violation?
Yes.
And what have you done to be more diligent, I guess?
Well, I've been talking to them to
Okay.
make sure that it not happen again.
Okay, thank you.
Is everyone tips trained now?
Yes, they are.
Sorry, can you state your name just for the record?
Oh, Rodier Limos.
Thanks for the deal. I knew your name.
Yeah.
Any other questions for licensee on the evidence?
Motion to close the review.
For a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It passes.
Motion to accept the violations as set forth in the report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, the recommendation. Do this.
I'd make a motion for a one-day suspension to be served on August 7th, 2019, with 1 day held in abeyance until August 8th, 2020.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes. Thank you, Rodeo.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Sconset Bookstore.
Okay. So for Sconset Bookstore, it is one count of sale of delivery to a person under 21 years of age. The operatives were able to purchase alcohol on August the 7th. We have a prior history, and I'll explain this. A written warning in 2015. Some days were held in abeyance. In that case, a day was held in abeyance. That expired on August the 1st. And we've had a discussion on this. That is not included in what the recommendation is. That day expired. What I recommended does not include that because the violation occurred a week later. So that was not part of the recommendation. It was based on the violation and it being a second violation in 4 years. Another thing we discussed is that in our regulations, it doesn't stipulate how far back we go to consider number of violations in the past. We have set it at 5 years. Again, that's just something we have set. You can certainly consider the time period of the last time that they had a violation. So the recommendation was a 1 day suspension based on the multiple violations. I did speak with, and Rhoda's here to speak, on the licensee, and he is certainly has instituted a card everyone policy since this occurred.
Good evening, Rhoda Wyman for the applicant, Rolf Nelson and Cindy Nelson. They have owned the Sconset Bookstore for 14 years. As Amy said, they did have a violation over 3 years ago. They also own for 23 years the Sconset Cafe, which is right next door, and they now own the Sconset Market, which is on the other side. So as you can see, they have been business people, and I like to add well-respected business people in the Sconset community for over 23 years. They also own a home in Sconset, so they're very connected to the Sconset community. On the night of the violation, and let me add that both Cindy and Rolf work in the bookstore as well as in the Sconset Market. They always work along with another employee. On the night of the violation, Cindy had to leave the island for a medical emergency with one of their sons, and so she was scheduled to work that night with the employee, but she was off island with an emergency, and Rolf was working at the market that evening as well. The employee was a new employee. He was over 18, but not a lot older, and he was tips trained, but he obviously made a mistake, and he was cited, and we're not arguing that. He was cited for not doing what he was supposed to do. My clients are very committed to working within all the rules and regulations. I think they've proven that. Yes, they've had 2 violations in 13 years, but this has been very, very upsetting for them. And as a result of this, what they have committed to do, and again, it's a very short season. They're open less than 100 days. They usually open right around Memorial Day. They're closing. They actually closed a couple of days after Labor Day, which they do every year. So they are only open for about 95 days. As a result of the violation, they have instituted 2 new policies. Number 1 is they're going with the Bartlett's Farm policy. Everyone gets carded. If they're 80 years old, they get carded. He told me very clearly I would get carded if I went in there. Everybody gets carded in there now, and that's going to be effective as soon as they open next Memorial Day. They're also in the process of talking to 2 vendors about a machine that they're going to purchase, and they will have that machine in place prior to opening next year. And the machine is, when you put in a license or any form of ID, the machine can determine whether or not it's a valid ID. In our opinion, with these 2 things, we seem to think that there's 100% coverage now that this will never happen again, that I will never be before you asking about the Sconset bookstore again, and they feel very comfortable that this is going to absolutely alleviate any further issues that they'll ever have. As I mentioned, they've been very involved in the community for 23 years. They've always run their business in a very professional manner and intend to continue to do so. What we would like to do, and I have a great deal of respect for Amy and her job. She's got a very tough job. I understand she had to go by the book, and I respect that. But what we're asking is that you reconsider what the recommendation is, and that you give them a written warning and put it in abeyance for the period of time that you are doing with the others, and to not force them to close one day in August next year. That would really be a financial hardship for them as well, because they're only open a short time, and their best season is between August 1st and August 15th. So I'd ask you to please reconsider and just give them a written warning based on their history, what they've done in the Sconset community for all these years with 3 different businesses, and what they are now proposing to do starting next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhoda. Any other questions on the evidence? If not, motion.
No.
Motion to close the review.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Motion to find the violations as set forth in the report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So it's a 1-day suspension. That's the recommendation.
So I make a motion that we make a 1-day suspension of the liquor license to be served on August 7th. I checked, that is not a Saturday. So that is my
It's a
motion.
Wednesday.
Is there a second for discussion?
Second.
Question, is there set up where they could continue to be open in a month?
No.
It's not.
No, it's a
not like-
package store.
It's
It's
just-
all
It's
or
a
nothing.
It's a
liquor.
package
It's
store,
not like
Yeah.
a cooler, they can just take
I
out.
don't think there's anything left to sell once you
That's
take the
what I mean,
alcohol out.
because, yeah, that's what their business is.
So it'd be closing.
And it would be happening with any package store that we,
Well, but, yes.
okay. Right.
So just,
May I just say
Right.
something?
yes.
Just for clarification, they do have other merchandise in there as well. They have a lot of gift kind of items in there, as well as selling alcohol. But again, we would really ask you to reconsider and to just give them a written warning. I think that they have shown over 13 years that they've been good citizens, and they've got 2 what we consider to be foolproof plans now, and we don't expect that this will ever happen again. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? On the motion? It's been seconded. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 4-0. Next up is the Islander. The Islander.
We are at the Islander. Islander, which is, as we know, an all alcoholic beverages package store. The violation is for 1 count for sale or delivery of a person under 21 years of age. This occurred on August the 7th, where underage operatives were able to purchase 2 six packs and leave the premises with those 6 packs. The history here, we're going to talk similar with the days held in abeyance. They had a suspension in 2015. They served a 2-day suspension in 2016 for that violation. 4 days were held in abeyance for 2 years from August the 3rd, 2016, which means they expired on August the 3rd, 2018, and this violation occurred, luckily for them, 4 days later. So those days expired on that date. I attached those meeting notes for your review too as well. There was some history of violations at that time and not tips train. This case is just about the failure to ask for the ID card, as well as second violation in those 3 years with a 1 to 2 day suspension of the liquor license. Asking for that suspension to be on August the 7th. Again, those 4 days have expired and weren't considered in that suspension.
Anybody here to speak? Licensee? Okay. Motion?
Motion to close the review.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept the violation as set forth in the report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the recommendation is a 1-day suspension.
Motion to suspend for 1 day, August 7th, 2019.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Next up is the chicken box.
The chicken box. This is for, again, 1 count of service of alcohol to a person under 21 years of age. This occurred on August the 7th at the chicken box when 2 the underage operatives purchased an alcoholic beverage, paid for and left. At the time, the person was tips trained. There's no history of this type of violation with the chicken box in the past 5 years. Obviously, they've been in business for a very long time. The guidelines is a written warning. I've put in here the recommendation written warning. And then as we review this, of course, one other thing that needs to happen before we renew this license is that they have to change their classification. They are still listed as a restaurant, which they are not. They need to change to general on premises because they don't get health inspections. So I just put that as a condition of finding out an investigation that hadn't been completed yet. That's what that's about. Just to have it on the record, that needs to happen. Other than that, a written warning for this violation.
Anybody here for the licensee speak? Okay. Sorry?
John's here, but he doesn't need to speak. Motion to close the review.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept the violation as set forth in the report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to issue a written warning, and Amy can handle the license clarification.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right. That completes the liquor license violations discussions. Number 2 was already addressed. Welcome back to it. Number 3, action of the select board comments on October 10, 2018 special town meeting warrant articles. Libya.
There was a draft warrant in your packet with the motions. There's been a little bit of update from the Finance Committee meeting on Monday. That updated draft is presented here, and the issue of the board making comments or not on any of the articles was included in the timeline for this special town meeting. I had a thought that you might want to make a comment on Article 5, which is the limitation of retail marijuana establishments. In talking with a couple of you, I don't know if you want to do that or not. I just thought if you're going to make a comment on anything, it might be that one.
It'd be explaining our reasoning.
Correct.
When does it have to be completed?
Well,
Today.
Yeah.
We haven't written anything. So
Right.
we either come up with now or nothing. Right.
If you wanted to, if you were really interested in this and you wanted to get a straightforward, sort of simple comment on, we could try to work with one of you on it tomorrow and just get it in, but there isn't a lot of time.
Okay. Pleasure of the board.
I'm not sure that we all have the same reasoning on it. That would be
It may just be an
consistent.
explanation that's made at town meeting.
I think it would be helpful if we could if we could agree on something to put in. I think it would be helpful myself. Because, I mean, I'm not sure what's going to happen at town meeting and what the tenor will be. My hope all along is it's easier to let the reins out than try to pull them back in. And so, I would like us, I'm happy that we're moving somewhat judiciously on this. We don't even know what all the rules from the state are going to be still yet anyhow. They change, relatively often, and they're still changing. And so I just think something along the lines of, and I don't have the words, but.
So the motion's going to be called, and someone's going to stand up and explain it, probably town council or someone. In the absence of, I don't have anything to add in a comment that wouldn't be really an explanation. And we've been doing this for 3 hours. So I don't think I think it would take us a lot of time to come up with a comment that I'm not sure would add a lot of value to the discussion at the town meeting.
Yeah, and I would add that I struggled with it a little bit. Just really, I want the town to have the opportunity to decide whether or not to limit or not. So it's my comment as simple as that. So
Well, that's kind of how I feel, that I felt like it was an appropriate thing to bring forward, but I don't have a definitive position on it.
Well, if we're not in super agreement and it's not very easy, then we'll just do it on town meeting floor. And we're doing a lot of outreach as well to get things out ahead of time.
And we'll have a voter's guide and stuff.
Okay.
Okay, so no comments. All right. Okay, then, sorry. I was just going to go on to the next.
Okay. You can go on, sure.
I don't want to take your job. The next item is reviewing the petition for an additional special town meeting, as well as scheduling the additional special town meeting. There's some information in your packet on this. Since the packet went out, some additional information has come in. So, in a nutshell, we received a petition in August received notification in August that there was an intent to call another special town meeting for a particular purpose. So we worked with the petitioner to get that submitted in a time frame that would allow us to have this second special town meeting 2, we're calling it, on the same day, for streamlining and making things a little easier. So that's where we were heading and have headed. We received another citizen warrant article for an unrelated matter that came in with sufficient signatures to place it on special town meeting 2. And earlier this week, we received a third article with enough signatures to place it on special town meeting 2. So all 3 of those are now incorporated into a draft warrant for the board's approval, with the idea that special town meeting 2 will be called the same. Proposal is that it's called the same day as 1, but at a different time. So the idea is that 1 starts at 6. At 7:30, if we're not done with 1, we recess 1, open 2, recess 2, and go back to 1, finish 1, and then go back to 2, if you follow.
We have to do that because we have to have a certain time for the second.
Correct.
So
And they
start then,
cannot be at the same time.
That's charter or state law, or
That they just can't start at the same time, but practically.
we can't start it whenever we want. It's got to be
There's got to be a
Time
time,
advertised.
a specific time.
Time
Correct.
Okay. Makes sense. I'm just.
Yep, there's a motion in your packet for this. In other information on it, we've developed a bit of a timeline, but it is a tight timeline. So the normal time frame has been compressed, but yet meets the statutory requirements. So it's the timeline's up here, and I found out today that the citizen warrant article. One of the citizen warrant articles that came in is a zoning article. The planning board hearing on that is scheduled for September 27th, which gives a very tight time frame, as you can see, to get it in the warrant, because the warrant has to be, none of that's going to be in the warrant because it can't meet the time range to be mailed out. So the motions for special town meeting 2 will be provided at town meeting.
The FinCom.
The FinCom and the planning board. Yep. But the FinCom will have its public hearing on its motions on September 24th. Planning board will have its on September 27th.
And there's a little typo. This should say Wednesday, September 26th.
Yes.
I just have a question of town council. Are all these articles approved as to form?
Members of the Board of Selectmen, so I can say yes as to Articles 1 and Article 2, which is the amendment to the coastal erosion bylaw is one. Article 2 is the zoning amendment. We just got Article 3.
Okay.
And I've done a preliminary review of that article, but I want to cogitate a little bit more on it, and I intend to send to, through the town manager, an email giving my review of that article.
Thank you.
Anything else on that?
I don't think there's anything else to mention on that, unless you have questions.
You have questions, Dawn?
No, I was looking for the motion. I was trying to find what page it was
So
on.
Madam Moderator is going to have a really interesting evening, keeping it all.
Yes.
I have a comment. I'm just a little troubled at the lateness of some of these articles because it makes it difficult. It's much more, especially the last one that just got in under the wire. It puts us. We're having a hard enough time dealing with a special town meeting to then get this looked at properly, planning board look at it properly, understand the implications of it, and it just makes it very difficult. And I understand people feel strongly different ways about different things, but I worry about the precedent. Are we gonna close things in the spring and then have people run 5 more things up the flagpole? I think we have to be, I don't think it's good process personally. Regardless of whether I agree with them or not, I just think the process itself is a little flawed.
Yeah.
So under the general laws, if you receive 200 signatures on a petition to call a special town meeting, the board has to call that within 45 days of receipt of the petition. And then these other two, at least the second one had in excess of 100 signatures. I'm not sure. I assume the third one had, I'm not sure how many, but it was in excess of 100. So, my advice to the board is if you receive petitions prior to the closing of the warrant, they should go on the warrant.
Yeah.
Right. And I agree with that. I understand the law, but I'm making a point that it's so it's sort of like when we get stuff in our packet late and we haven't had a chance to look at it and people don't understand it. It's more of that situation where, we should be, cognizant, we should be respectful of each other. And some of this I think isn't, but anyway.
Well, we would have the ability to call a different date, but I actually appreciate that people wanting to get these in did it in such a way that we can get them on October 10th.
Yeah,
rather
that-
than calling a whole nother special
Yes.
town meeting, because these things come up and it's the citizens' right to go out and get those signatures and bring something
I understand.
forward. But yes,
I'm not
it's-
saying it's not their right. I'm
it's
just
more
saying.
difficult.
You can, you know.
I think it's tough for the recommendation, like the FinCom motions, the planning.
That's my
board.
point.
That part, there's not enough time really to get that out, but it is what it is.
And some of these things have huge implications, financial implications, policy implications. Some of the things that are being asked are not simple issues, and they deserve a lot of analysis and a lot of understanding, which I don't know that we're going to get in the next 3 weeks. So, I read the third one 4 times, and I'm not. Yeah, I may not be the smartest guy, but I'm not the dumbest, and I had trouble quite figuring out what it was doing or why they were doing it. And so, it might come clear when we get to it, but so anyway,
Well, that's what happened on town meeting floor.
I
I
understand.
might decide we need more time, and then it'll be
I
discussed on October 10th. Anything else on this? Good.
Just so you know, I was going to just say the motion in your packet's on page 246.
Thank you.
So,
Want me to, I move to call a special town meeting pursuant to the citizens petition received September 4th, 2018, signed by the lead petitioner, Burton Balkin, for Wednesday, October 10th at 7:30.
Second. Oh, you want, is this all one motion?
I have to
That's
give it
all one motion?
I'm gonna give it all.
3 motions, just vote each one.
Yeah,
Okay,
all right.
let's make I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I move to open the warrant, insert therein the 2 petition articles.
3, no.
Right.
That's
Sorry,
one.
when we did this, there was only the 2, but
All
now
right,
we
so
have
all
3.
right, the 3 petition articles, lead petitioners Burton Balkin, Diane O'Neill, that have been received as today.
And Megan Glowacki.
And Megan Glowacki, the third one.
It's actually going to be Patrick Tafe, I believe.
All right.
Oh, sorry.
Insert Patrick Tafe.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, I move to close the warrant for the special town meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Moving on, discussion regarding establishing adult use retail marijuana license criteria is continued from August 22nd. We didn't discuss it too much on the 22nd because we didn't have town council here, and put it back on here because we had town council. And what I want us to talk about is kind of the process, and we can revamp where we're at if we want. We can talk about, do we need to decide any criteria right now? Do we want to wait? I'm just giving some options for discussion. Do we want to wait till after special town meeting to really see what the voters say, what the voters vote on the limitations on all 5 articles? Don?
I would make a motion right now to continue our discussion of this after town meeting.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I only say is there any discussion because I know there's people here who came to speak.
Yeah. I just
guess-
want to say I appreciate the additional information that we were given. I'm starting to see how these 2 together could start to be something that we could utilize. So I want to say I appreciate that before we totally close it.
And I actually, even though I was a big advocate for the licensing, I'm unconvinced right now. And I think I need a lot more conversations before I rush into some big licensing complexity.
Okay. Before we take a vote on this, is there anything we want to ask or talk about? Any questions? Because we have town council here. Just because it doesn't.
No.
No.
I had one question. I'm just wondering who decides on these proposals, who reviews the proposals for the town of Winchendon?
Winchendon.
Who they have an evaluation process in their application. I'm just wondering if you know or if anyone knows who actually reviews their licenses and applies those evaluations to the applications.
You're talking about the Richmond.
Yeah.
So,
Looks like
So typically, the way this would work, I mean, ultimately, it's going to be up, obviously, to the selectmen to issue the license. But typically, when you have an RFP process like that, there's an evaluation committee
Okay.
that's appointed. And particularly in the Winchendon case, they have to take each proposal and they have to assign a rating of highly advantageous, advantageous, or not advantageous, and then come up with a composite rating. Typically, that's done by a review committee, and that recommendation is then presented to the selectmen, who would then make the determination.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Well, as any of those rating systems, what you set up is going to sort of determine what gets spit up. You know, if you favor, you know, someone with lots of money and lots of experience and whatever you set as your criteria, you're going to get what your criteria are. So you have to understand what criteria you want. So it's sort of, you know, I'm not ready to do that tonight. I know that. You know, and we've seen that when we use this in some of our licensing. We've seen it, you know, work and not work at times, and have to be amended and tweaked to get after results. So,
Okay. Anything else?
No.
All those in favor on the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Do you want to talk to the public?
Question?
I think everybody doesn't really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's.
I think we voted. I think we just voted.
Well, I don't think
Yeah.
they.
Yes,
Oh.
I'm in favor.
Okay,
But if there's a public
so I
comment.
said aye.
I don't mind the comment.
Said aye.
Yep, so it passed. I apologize for anybody who came here tonight thinking we were gonna have a discussion on this criteria. It doesn't seem like this board wants to talk about it before the special town meeting. We don't want to talk about it now before the special town meeting. We're moving on to committee reports or comments.
Just to echo Libby's comment that we have been meeting with a wind energy company to consider this community benefit agreement, which we will be talking about soon. And the Affordable Housing Trust met, and we're making good headway with our strategic plan.
I have a couple, but anybody else?
I probably do, but I'm
Can't think of it.
I'm shell shocked.
I'll be quick. Just to update on Capcom. We're meeting every week, going through, you know, DPW, transportation, marine. This last week we did police and marine, and there was really good discussions. I learned a lot about the barracks, the old Coast Guard station out in Will Beach Road, and how that's starting to, it's usable, dilapidated, but how much money is it going to be to fix that up? To me, that was a housing issue. How do you house 20, 25, 30 CSOs? If that was to go away, 5 or 10 years, where did they go? So we were talking about that as a capital discussion. And then today, you know, I want to give a lot of accolades and appreciation to Sergeant Marshall, all the work he's doing on the suicide prevention. Today is National Suicide Prevention Day, so in the Athenaeum, they had a little just a gathering where they talked about what the Cape Cod Suicide Prevention Coalition is doing, what they're doing on the Cape. People came over for it. And then it was really interesting that everybody, it was a rope up, and everybody could take a ribbon and talk about somebody that they know and hope. And it was a really nice 45 minutes. And there were some Islanders there who talked about their experiences from a long time ago, from today. And I just thought I wanted to bring that up there. It was touching. It was putting those kind of stuff in the back of your mind to the front. And kind of my big walk away from that was it's okay to talk about it, and we need to continue to keep talking about it. Every community, but definitely a community that's
Touches everyone.
30 miles out to sea, isolated. Right. So I just want to say the work that Fairwinds and Sergeant Kevin Marshall's doing is great. And I was happy to be able to support them.
I don't have anything.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Steven? Sorry.
So, John, were you on the 1 hour Georgetown AAP interview today, or webinar today? I was. It was really good.